Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter, and this is the complete Monster Hunter Bestiary version 2024. This is just the completed series of my part 1 through 5 of the Monster Hunter Bestiary, which I've been working on, so if you've seen all those videos, you don't have to watch this one. If you've been waiting for it to be complete and you just want it all compiled into one big video, this one's for you. Also, hopefully YouTube's algorithm likes it because it's a longer video and might recommend it to some people who might have missed out on these series. I am going to be doing some editing to remove some of the redundant parts of each video, but there are going to be some weird edits. Obviously, when it goes from like part 1 to part 2, I'll constantly be saying, okay, starting out, we're on part 3 or something like that. So excuse those hiccups, but for the most part, I've tried to reduce the redundant parts to make it a little bit more concise. But yeah, it's a long video, but it was a work of love, and I hope you guys found it interesting. I do have a side video which talks about the evolutionary chart of Monster Hunter monsters, which you can check out. And there's also a video which I consider a supplement to this one, which goes into explaining what is a variant, subspecies, rare species, and all the other game-specific variants that we've had throughout the series. Anyways, without further ado, here is the Monster Hunter Bestiary. Hope you guys enjoy. In this series, I'll be going over nearly 230 monsters that have appeared in the Monster Hunter mainline series. I wanted to make sure that this was uniquely something that I could do, and include something new for everyone from beginner to seasoned hunter. I will share with you the English and Japanese names, the official nicknames the monsters have in Japanese, which are sometimes but often not referenced in the English localization, and really help give you some insights into how the development team is thinking about and positioning the monsters. As well as I'll give you a bonus fun fact for each one as well. I'll be going over the monsters by monster type, and in this video we'll be looking at the Brute Wyverns and Leviathans. When I say mainline games, I mean that I'll be excluding games like Monster Hunter Frontier and Monster Hunter Stories, which take place in their own respective universes. Without further ado, let's jump in. We'll be kicking things off with one of my favorite monster types, which is the Brute Wyverns, which in Japanese is Juryushu. Actually means beast wyvern, but because there's already a beast wyvern type, they call them Brute Wyverns, and I think you'll understand the concept once you see the art for all these monsters. As for the common characteristics of Brute Wyverns, you'll notice that 1, they don't fly. They have very strong hind legs, which they often use to bulldoze and chase you down. They've got smaller, developed front arms. Doesn't mean that they're useless, but they're smaller. And they generally have 3 different toes on each foot, but I'm not sure if that's a hard rule or just a more general tendency. Brute Wyverns first made their appearance in the 3rd generation of games, so we'll be starting from there with Barroth, or in Japanese, Boroborosu. Its nickname is Dosharyu. Now, one note for all these monsters, but in Japanese they always attach the wyvern word, which is ryu, to the end of it, and I just want to note that it doesn't mean that they're all technically wyverns. It's kind of like just saying monster, so this is like the earth and sand monster, but because it's Monster Hunter and that's just the naming convention, that's what they do. Anyways, this one is called the Dosharyu, and dosha, do meaning earth and sha meaning sand, just comes together and makes it the earth and sand wyvern, which makes sense because it will play in the mud and the sand and will charge you down. The fun fact for these ones, and if you played Monster Hunter World, you definitely know this, but the favorite snack for a Barroth are ants. Yummers. Coming up next is its subspecies called the Jade Barroth. You'll notice in Japanese they don't actually use the names of the colors or the hues that capture the monster, they just put ashu at the end of every name. So for Barroth, it's just Boroborosu ashu, which just means Barroth subspecies. So it's a little special thing that we have in English that they don't have in Japanese to sort of make up for the balance for the fact that we don't get these cool kanji-based nicknames. For the Jade Barroth, it's called Hyosairyu, which is the ice-crushing wyvern, which of course is because the scene appears in the tundras and will basically just crush and plow you into ice. My fun fact for this one is that unlike the Barroth, who likes to eat ants, the Jade Barroth's favorite food is something you can find in the tundra, which are bunahabras. I hope I said that right. Next up is the flagship monster for Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which is Brachydios. In Japanese, his name is pretty much identical, it's Brachydiosu, and his nickname is Sairyu, which means the crushing wyvern. You might recognize that kanji from the ice crushing Baroth, but the Sai here is the kanji for to crush. The fun fact for this monster is the origins of its name, which is brachium, which is Latin for arm, and obsidian, because obviously it's got a very hard obsidian-like shell. Next one up is the Raging Brachydios. Now this is considered a variant, it's not a subspecies and it's not a rare species. For these in Japanese, they do similar to what we do in English. They have a very descriptive and very colorful word that's placed before the name of the monster. For this one, it's Takeri Hazeru Brachydios, which translates roughly to bursting rage brachydios. So the word raging, I think, captures it really well. And my fun fact for this monster actually applies to the original one as well, which is if you did not play the 3rd generation in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the element of blast was actually called slime back then. I guess they probably didn't think that it would be a staple going forward in the series, and they wanted to make it really easy to understand because this was the only monster that had it, and it was the slime on its fist that would blow up and sort of become the blast element. Next up, one of my favorites, which is Devil Joe. I am using an older render because I don't like the world render here, but his Japanese name is Ibirujo. For his nickname, it's Kyoboryu, which translates to violent wyvern. If you can hear that correctly, yes, my fun fact is, of course, its Japanese name, which is phonetically, literally, evil jaw, Ibirujo. Now, jo doesn't really sound like jo, like your jaw, but that's just the way that it's pronounced in Japanese, and it sounds really cool because it's not a word. You wouldn't say jo for your ago, your jaw, often in Japanese, so it sounds very fantastical and different and very cool, but I can see why they went with Joe instead of Devil Jaw. While cool, it sounds a little adolescent, so I'm actually pretty happy with the localization choice in this one. Next up, we have its variant, which is the Savage Devil Joe. In Japanese, they call it Ikari Kurao Ibirujo, which I absolutely adore because Ikari means anger, Kurao is a very crude way of saying to be consumed or to consume. So this is the anger consumed Devil Joe. This thing ain't got no chill. He's upset, he's red, he's wild, and he's also one of my favorite monsters. My fun fact for them is this is something that's been really big in the community for the last year or two as people sort of uncovered it, but there was a long sort of rumor that it would consume its own severed tail. While I don't doubt that it would actually do that, like in general, in the game, unfortunately, it does not. There was some videos that were kind of faked and created a lot of urban legend, which is really fun. But unfortunately, he does not do that in the game. But that's not to say that a Devil Joe wouldn't eat its own tail. I kind of think that they would eat anything. Next up is the Duramboros. In Japanese, it's called Doboruberuku, and its nickname is the Tail Hammer Wyvern, Bitsuiryu. Bi means tail and Tsui means hammer, which is fitting because he does use his tail like a hammer and slams it down on you. My fun fact for Duramboros is the origin of its name, which is Duro, which is hard, Ambulat, which is walk, and Oros from mountain. Lots of Latin and Greek and words like that, so a very fitting name for the creature. Next we have its subspecies, which in English is Rust Duramboros. Of course, in Japanese they just put Ashu, so it's Doboruberuku Ashu. And its kanji for its nickname is the Bifuryu, which means the tail axe wyvern. So just swapping out the hammer for an axe because this thing does slam it down in a little bit differently from the regular type. And the fun fact for this one actually comes from a localization blog, which is still up if you Google for it, in which the localization head Andrew at the time talked about some other names that were thrown around, and Red Cloak and Gritstone were once possibilities, but I'm pretty happy they went with Rust. I like the idea that this thing may have just been there for a long time. The old mountain roaming around the forest. So yeah, good choice. Next up is everyone's favorite roly-poly, Uragan, or in Japanese, Uragankin. His nickname is Bakutsuiryu, the explosive hammer wyvern. Baku, which you'll notice a lot in these monster names, means to explode. And then kotsui, which you saw earlier, also means hammer. Fun fact for this monster, a lot of you probably know, but if you do knock it over, if you have a pickaxe on you, you can actually mine ore from its back, which I always thought was really cool. Then we have his subspecies, which is the Steel Uragan, or in Japanese, Uragankin Ashu. And the kanji for his nickname is Kotsuiryu, which means the Steel Hammer Wyvern. So just an Uragan that hits much harder. But what hits much harder is the truth behind its popularity. This poor sucker is the lowest rated subspecies when it comes to player polls for the entire series. Oof, indeed. In Monster Hunter Generations, it did get a Deviant, which is just a fancy category of variants. This one is called the Crystal Beard Uragan. In Japanese, they use the appending word Takaramatoi, which is a very interesting way to read that, which means the treasure-clad Uragan, or something that is covered in gemstones or treasures. And there is an in-game lore that says if you spot one, it will give you good fortune. So I guess all of you watching this video and not just listening to it are blessed with good fortune. Hopefully it comes true. Next up is Radoban, or in Japanese, Radobarukin. His nickname is Kotsuiryu, which is the Bone Hammer Wyvern. See, you're already probably picking up on some of the repeating kanji that come through some of these names. This one is probably obvious, but my fun fact is you are what you eat, and Radoban loves to snack on bones, which is perfect because it's found in the Rotten Vale, which also explains why it has bones all over its body, thus making for lots of breakable parts and item drops. Thanks. Moving on to Iceborne, we have Banbaro, or in Japanese, Bafubaro. The nickname is the Mogyuryu, which means Mo is for aggressive or fierce, Gyu could mean cow, but in this actual reference it refers to buffalo, and then wyvern. It was hard to come up with a fun fact for this monster besides the fact that it is just very fun to fight, but it is a vegan, he only is an herbivore, and he appears quite literally everywhere, to the point where it's kind of a running gag that every time they were showing off Iceborne on stage, that sometime during the presentation, a Bafubaro or Banbaro would join in and cause havoc. Next we have Anjanath, which of course was our debut monster of Monster Hunter World. Its Japanese name is very similar, Anjanafu. Its nickname, Bangakuryu, means Barbaric Jaw Wyvern, with Ban meaning sort of wild or barbaric, Gaku here referring to the jaw, and then Wyvern. Fun fact for this one is that it has a membrane that goes along its sort of tail fans, if you spot, which helps with heat regulation because this thing does get pretty heated up and spews fireballs when enraged. In Iceborne, we were blessed with a subspecies for him called the Fulgur Anjanath, which in Japanese is just Anjanafu Ashu. And the kanji nickname for him is Daigakuryu, which means Thunder Jaw Wyvern. A fun fact for this one is that this sucker is actually 2 threat ranks above the normal species. Normally, it's not that crazy to have a subspecies be stronger than the original species, but this is quite a gap, and I think you probably felt it if you faced it in Iceborne. Next up is everyone's favorite from Monster Hunter Generations, which is Glavenus, or in Japanese, Dinobarudo. Its nickname is the Slashing Wyvern, Zandyu, where Zan means to cut or slice or slash, like with a sword, and Yu. Fun fact for this is that at Tokyo Game Show 2015, before the game was released, they had a demo in which you can face it either solo or in multiplayer, and no group during all of Tokyo Game Show 2015 managed to defeat it in multiplayer. Although there were several people who cleared it solo, I think just because it has that erratic tail that can, you know, sort of wipe out more than one person at once, made it very hard for people going in without any prior knowledge to clear that fight. It's just really funny. He cleaned up house. In the follow-up Iceborne, we did get a subspecies, which is the Acidic Glavenus, in Japanese just Dinobarudo Ashu. Kanji for his nickname is Ryuzandyu, which means Sulfur Slashing Wyvern. One note here, grammatically, I don't know whether it should be slashing or slash or cut. It's just a name, so it can be either or, but they attach the word sulfur, where in English it's acidic. Fun fact, where the regular Glavenus is based off of a greatsword, how it uses its tail, this one they based it off of a katana, so kind of a longsword. In Monster Generations, we did get a deviant for the monster called the Hellblade Glavenus. The descriptor they used for Japanese was Jinmetsujin Dinobarudo. Jinmetsujin meaning the Scorched Blade. Fun fact, if you're looking for speedruns from Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate specifically, Hellblade EX, which was the hardest quest for him, is definitely one of the most popular hunts that was used in that title for speedruns. So look up your favorite weapon and Hellblade EX and you'll find some really interesting runs in which people play much better than I can. And while this won't be out until 2025, we did get the reveal as of making this video of a new brood wyvern in Monster Hunter Wilds called the Kematrice. In Japanese, this is Kematorisu. And the nickname for this is Enbiryu, which means the flame or flaming tail wyvern. We of course don't know much about this monster, so my fun fact here is that it uses its very long tail to sweep the ground and sort of cause friction to ignite oil and make lots of flames. The next is also from Monster Hunter Wilds and was recently announced, which is Ronpoporo, which is an adorable name. In Japanese, it's, forgive me if I say this wrong because it's very hard to say, is Pupuroporu. Pupuroporu. Its nickname is the Shofunryu, which means the swamp spout wyvern. First kanji here, Shou meaning swamp, and Fun meaning to erupt or to spout out like water. And it does, well, of course, like to stick its tail in the ground, its stinger, and then eject gas into the ground, which causes it to explode. Alright, thanks for making it to the midway point. We just got done with the brute wyverns, and now it's time to check out the Leviathans, which I know is a very popular monster type. This in Japanese is called the Kairyushu. Kairyu, kai meaning sea or ocean, and ryu meaning wyvern. If I were to nail down the characteristics of it, I would say 1. Think fly, sky, but swim. These things are the kings of the ocean, of the water, where you have, monsters that fly and are kings of the skies. These things are unmatched when it comes to the water, ice, magma, wherever it might be. They all have serpentine-like bodies, and honestly, they're all just pretty gorgeous. Interesting enough, Leviathans also made their debut in the 3rd generation of Monster Hunter games. Starting up, we have Agnactor, which in Japanese is Agunakutoru. Its nickname, Enkaryu. Enka means En for fire, Ka is the kanji for pike or sort of halberd, and wyvern. And it makes a lot of sense, and I think they even reference this in the description for the monster, the fire pike wyvern. It's because it does use its body and especially its nose to sort of stab at you like a pike. The fun fact here is you may as well call this thing the Mind's Eye tutorial monster, because when this thing becomes hardened from all the molten lava on it, and it becomes sort of like a very dark color, its armored state, the head, almost everything bounces off because only 15% of your damage will actually get through. So yeah, my memories of this monster is, man, that thing is hard, literally. It also has a subspecies. I will note here that I think the render I'm using here is actually the hardcore one from Frontier. It's just I couldn't find a good render for the subspecies, and this is close enough in appearance, but in the game he's a little bit more bluish than whitish, but I just wanted to note that. But this is the Glacial Agnactor. If you played Lance Main in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, no doubt you know this monster well because it was arguably the best set for that weapon. Its name in Japanese just Agunakutoru Ashu, and its nickname just replaces the fire for frozen, so Tokaryu, which means the frozen pike wyvern. Unlike the original species, for this one the chest is always soft, so you can always just get right up in there and just poke him to death, especially if you're lancing. The next one is a monster I really hope we get back in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is Gobble, or Gobble, depending on how you want to pronounce it. In Japanese, it's got a very cute name, which is Chanagaburu, and its nickname, Togyoryu, means the lanternfish wyvern. Fun fact, this thing loves froggies. It loves to eat them. So at the very start of the quest, if you had a frog, you could actually fish it out of the water and start with a large down, which I always thought was really cool. Next up is everyone's favorite flagship from the 3rd generation, which is Lagiacrus, or Lagiacrus, or however you want to pronounce it. Japanese, it's Dagiarukusu. And its nickname is very simple, it's just Kairyu, which means the sea wyvern or ocean wyvern. Do note that in Japanese we don't have a difference between an R and an L, so it's kind of hard to tell what it should be. I just put R in there just to remain consistent across the board. I'm always going to use R's when it comes to how I phonetically write out all the names Japanese, but you can also consider them L's if you want. A fun fact, and probably a painful reminder for many of you, is that it was actually in a prototype build of Monster Hunter World. There is footage out there of them showing it off, and that's where they discovered that with the engine and how they sort of made all the curved surfaces in Monster Hunter World, that Leviathans were just not going to work with the technology. The amount of CPU compute that they would need to do in order to sort of do the detection of where the body was colliding with the ground just was not working. Hopefully they got that fixed now that we're seeing Leviathans pop up in Wilds. So I think everyone's expecting Laggy to come back either as in the main roster or as a DLC fight. Laggy also has a subspecies which does swim but mostly is fought on land, which is the Ivory Lagiacrus, in Japanese just Dagiarukusu Ashu. Its name is Hakukairyu, which just means the white sea wyvern. A fun fact for this one, if you haven't played Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, is that the Moga Chief village elder was actually in a rivalry with this monster. He'd constantly encounter it, fight it, run away, it ran away, back and forth until they finally had a decisive battle and he got his butt kicked. And it hit him so hard that he ended up retiring and quitting hunting altogether. So, good job, Ivory. Next, we have one of my absolute favorites, which is the rare species, which is the Abyssal Lagiacrus. In Japanese, when you have a rare species, instead of putting Ashu, which means subspecies, they just append Kishoshu, which means rare species, at the end of the name. So it's just Dagiarukusu Kishoshu. The descriptor that they use for its nickname here is Meikairyu, which means the Abyss Sea Wyvern. And I'll just note here that the Mei that's being here is also used for something like Meikai, where Kai is the kanji for world, which means the underworld. So the Abyss here also comes up with this like dark underground sort of feel, which I think is really cool and edgy. A fun fact, while not, I think, established as in-game lore, there is a backstory that Kaname, the director at the time, or the story director, explained on it during a stage event that, at least in their eyes, this is not a different species of Laggy. This is one that is just gotten so powerful and so old that it just grew really large, and it just became very hard for itself to sustain on the more shallow waters, and so it had to go deep down into the abyss or the deep waters in order to find prey, and that's where it's lurking and you have to fight it. Next is Nibblesnarf, one of my favorite names in English. And also in Japanese, it's Hapuruboka. I often accidentally call that Hapurupoka, but it's Hapuruboka. Its nickname, Senkoryu, means the lurking or underneath the ground mouth wyvern, which makes a lot of sense because it will sort of go under the sand and then come up with its jaw and try to swallow you whole. So of course my fun fact is that you can place a large barrel bomb, sort of lure it to come and try to pop out of the sand to swallow you, and make it swallow the barrel bomb itself. I have a video of this up on my YouTube somewhere, but then it will then blow up inside of its belly and you'll get a large down. And I guess also a fun fact is you can also fish this monster out of the ground, very much like you can fish Gobel out of the water. The next one is Royal Ludroth. This is a very big male Ludroth. In Japanese, it's just Roaru Dorosu. And the nickname is Suiju, which means water beast. Which leads to my fun fact, which is I think this is the only monster in the mainline series that doesn't have that Ryu, the wyvern, attached to the back end. Probably because it was already taken or something, but I just found it really interesting that this is like the one instance that you don't see it. It does have a subspecies called the Purple Ludroth, in Japanese just Roaru Dorosu Ashu, and its nickname is Shisuiju, which means the Purple Water Beast. And a reminder and fun fact here is that although it is a pinkish color, this is not a female. All the larger Ludroths are male, so this is just a difference in color. And of course it does poison you, which explains the coloring as well. Next up, my favorite of the Fated 4 from Monster Hunter Generations, which is Mizutsune. In Japanese, it's called Tamamitsune, and its nickname, Hokoryu, means the Bubble Fox Wyvern. Now we know from the game that there's sort of a turf war between it and Zinogre, and that's kind of the theme of the Fated 4, is that they're getting in beef with the apex monsters of that region. But their rivalry actually goes back even further. Apparently the idea of having a monster based on a fox and having a monster based on a wolf were both valid ideas that they had for Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which was released only here in Japan. And ultimately they sidelined the idea of a fox and chose the wolf one instead, and thus Zinogre was born. So this thing got sidelined so that Zinogre could take the spotlight, but then made a comeback, and I absolutely love this monster. In Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, we even got a rare species for it, called the Violet Mizutsune. In Japanese, again, they're just using Kishoshu, which means the rare species, so Tamamitsune Kishoshu, and its nickname is Senkoryu, which means the Flame Fox Wyvern. If you're into anime or manga or Japanese mythology, you'll probably notice a lot of, foxes, foxfire, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll see that theme play out in the monster after this. But my fun fact for the Violet Mizutsune is that I think this is the only case, correct me if I'm wrong, of a monster that has a rare species but does not have a known subspecies yet in the game. So fun fact, it got the special treatment. In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, it also got a deviant, which is called the Soul Seer Mizutsune. In Japanese, the word that they use for the Soul Seer is Tengan, so Tengan Tamamitsune. Tengan meaning divine for 10, and Gan for eye, so the Divine Eye Mizutsune. And this goes into the lore of both a fox and also just Japanese folklore as well. The folklore one, which I didn't write on here, is actually Zatoichi. There are some Japanese films based upon this idea of a blind samurai who can sort of has clairvoyance and can see things without having to actually see it, so you get that kind of concept. But we also continue the fox tradition. In Japan, in the mythology, they say that if a fox reaches 1,000 years life or old, that they will become a heavenly fox, gaining clairvoyance or a divine form. So yeah, Divine Eye Mizutsune means that it's a very old, battle-hardened Mizutsune. Maybe not 1,000 years though. Moving to the 5th generation, we have Somnicanth, which was introduced in Monster Hunter Rise. Japanese name is Isonemikuni. Very interesting name. And its nickname, very easy to remember, Ningyoryu, which means the Mermaid Wyvern. Doesn't it look beautiful, just like a mermaid? Fun fact, if you are not on Twitter/X or whatever you want to call it, or if you're just a newer fan of the franchise, but during the development lead up and before the release of Monster Hunter Rise, they teased out this monster with a hand drawing from the director Ichinose, and this is what it looked like. And they actually ended up having a funny joke where he said that this is not a fried prawn, because ebi fry is quite a popular food here in Japan, and it was really hard for people to come up with the idea of what the heck this thing was, but when they revealed it in the trailer, it made total sense. So I don't know if this was Ichinose-san's actual drawing, like by his own hand, but I think it's hilarious. In Sunbreak, we did get a subspecies for the monster called the Aurora Somnicanth, in Japanese just Isonemikuni Ashu. And its nickname, they just appended the ice to it, so we have the Hyo Ningyoryu, which means the Ice Mermaid Wyvern. Fun fact for this one, the original Somnicanth was modeled after a mermaid, and for this one the motif was that of a lorelei, or a siren, or some type of spirit that would lure boatmen and fishers into the sea to kill them. So yeah, much more dangerous. Next up, one of my personal favorites, and I swear to GOG it has really fudged drop rates for its rare gem, because they never drop, which is Almudron. This in Japanese is Oromidoro, and its nickname, the Deoryu, kind of hard to say, is the Muddy Old Man Wyvern. De here is just the kanji for mud, and then the next one, the O, is interesting because it does literally mean like a venerable old man, a sage, an elder. So if there's any question about this monster being an old man, well, there you go. Fun fact for this one, and this was through a interview that they did with one of the sound directors or the sound team members. here in Japan, which they were talking about that sort of like shaky sound that sound effect you hear when it shakes its tail. And they said that the Foley artist made it by using a cat box. They said a pet toilet, which I would assume would be a cat box, filling it with water and then stepping in it with boots. So yeah, the Foley artists never, cease to amaze me with their creativity in making sound effects. In Sunbreak, we did also see a subspecies called the Magma Almudron, in Japanese just Oromidoro Ashu, and its nickname Yooryu, which means the molten old man wyvern. Interesting fun fact about this one: while you'll notice a lot of monsters, the subspecies are bigger and stronger than the regular ones, this one is actually about 17 to 20% smaller than the regular one. So when you first fought it, you probably went like, oh my gosh, it's a gold crown small, but nope, it's just a smaller, different monster, and they did that for gameplay variation, and I think it worked really well. Then of course, at the time of making this video, at the end of October in 2024, we do have from Wilds, which is releasing next year, the Balahara, however they're going to pronounce that in the game. In Japanese, it's very similar. It's Balahara. And this is the Saikairyu, which means the Sand Sea Wyvern. The first one, the Sa here, just referring to sand, and Kai, which you saw from like the Lagio Cruise with just the Sea Wyvern, Kai, meaning the Sand Sea, or the Sea of Sands. Because the game's not out yet, it's kind of hard to come up with a fun fact, but I did find out that the tripartite sort of triple like jaw, like the three tongues and the jaw splitting into three different ways, is not just a sci-fi thing. Apparently deep sea creatures do have this, so it's a real world thing that does exist. I'm more curious to find out what the heck that emitting blue light inside of its body is. Will we ever know? Who knows? And the very last mainline Monster Hunter series Leviathan, at least at the time of making this video, is the apex of the second area in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is the Ulthduna, or in Japanese, the Ustuna. Its nickname, Hagoromo-ryu, means the wave dress wyvern. Ha here referring to wave, and Goromo or Koromo referring to a dress or clothing or silky dress, something like that. I guess for the fun fact for this one, this is my favorite monster revealed so far. Outside of maybe the new sort of squid-like octopus, until we get more information, I can't say for sure, but I absolutely love Ulthduna, living its best life, doing belly flops for days, and interacting with the environment in some really cool ways. So I can't wait to face this monster, and its outfit is gorgeous. Okay, to kick things off, we're going to start with Fanged Beasts, also called Gajushu in Japanese. For these, think animals like mammals, primates, bears, rabbits, stuff like that. Other characteristics may be that they are often furry, and also many of them have strong arms. Basically think a wild animal and that's what you get. Our first one is an OG from the original series, which is Bulldrome, in Japanese called Dosfango. Its nickname is O-Inoshishi, which means a large boar, and this thing has been a lot of nightmare fuel for a lot of people because they like to run, charge, and hit you. Fun fact for this one, of course it's hard to put the name Fun and Bulldrome together, but Monster Hunter Frontier, for their 10,000 followers celebration quest in 2011, apparently had an absolutely gammoth-size, huge Bulldrome as a quest. Look up some pictures, it looks like it was a lot of fun. I hope they start doing these goofy things more in the event quest for something like Monster Hunter Wilds. Next is good old man right hooker Blagonga, in Japanese called Dodo Barango. His nickname is Yuki Jishi. This is actually coming off of Shishi, but because it's a compound word, it's just pronounced Yuki Jishi, which means snow lion, aptly named. The fun fact here is that Shishi doesn't actually refer to a lion, like in modern day lion, like the cats, but it's more of a mythical beast. If you come to Japan or China or other places like that, there's like cultural sort of like folk dances, like there's the Shishimai, where you see people dressed up in a costume of this like dragon-like dog cat thing, and that's what a Shishi refers to. Next up is his subspecies called the Copper Blagonga. In Japanese, if you watch the first episode, you'll know that Ashu is just affixed to names and just means subspecies, so Dodo Barango Ashu. and its nickname is Sunajishi, which means the Sand Lion. The fun fact for this one is actually this monster only appeared once in Portable 2nd G or Freedom Unite. It's so forgettable that Capcom has basically forgotten to even include it ever again in any other Monster Hunter game, and honestly just playing it and seeing it, it's not that special, so I don't see this thing coming back anytime soon. Next up is everybody's favorite fart monster, which is Kongalala. In Japanese, his name is Baba Konga, and his nickname here is Momogeju. Momo is for pink, ge is for fur, so Momoge is pink furred, and Ju for beast. This thing, if you've seen from trailers or from past games, likes to eat different mushrooms and fart out at the hunter, causing various different effects. Very funny. Which leads me to my fun fact, which is even more funny because it's a fart monster. Even I remember when I went to the Capcom Cafe in 2017, they had like 3 monsters in which they made a special perfume of. I know that like Mizutsune was one of them, and one of them was Kongalala. Like, imagine like people going like, wait, what is that supposed to smell like? Apparently it had like a tropical smell, but I just thought it was a hilarious joke that they would choose this monster of all for a fragrant perfume. Speaking of gas, we have its subspecies, which is the Emerald Kongalala, in Japanese just Baba Konga Ashu, and its name just flips the color, so instead of Momo for being peach colored, this is Doku Geju. Doku means green, and Geju for the furred beast. This thing, the fun fact here is that it holds a lot of gas, like way more than the normal Kongalala, so you can expect more frequent and bigger episodes of flatulence. Next up is everyone's favorite, really upset monkey who can stand pretty much shoulder to shoulder with elder dragons, which is Rajang. In Japanese, his name is Rajan. It doesn't have the G at the end, it's just Rajan. And his nickname is Kinjishi, so the golden lion. Again, Shishi or Jishi here doesn't actually refer to a lion. The fun fact for this one is I'm not sure how many people actually know about this, but I'm surely you've seen it. But in its reveal trailer for Monster Hunter, was it World or Iceborne, when they showed him, it almost looked like he was given a thumbs up as he sort of like twisted his body towards the hunter. And a user, Teddy Mark N, made a incredibly viral tweet where he put a thumbs up on him and said, Ijan. Ijan is a very colloquial, more everyday way of saying like, nice. Like, that's cool, that's nice. And it caught on, and within 2 months they made it official, and they even released, and I have a URL pasted here and it's in the description below, they have a full like PNG set of them giving thumbs up, calling them the Ijan series. E just means good, and Jan is just a very informal way to make a statement, so the best way I can translate it in English is nice. Rajan is special that he doesn't have a subspecies yet, but he does have a special variant called the Furious Rajan. In Japanese, the phrase that they're using for furious here is Gekgoshita, and this means furious, so it's a pretty one-for-one translation. And the fun fact here is that arguably the hardest quest in any of the Portable Series games for Monster Hunter was Freedom Unite's Twin Terrors. This took place in the old arena, so it was actually quite small, and it was 2 simultaneous, incredibly buffed Furious Rajangs. A lot of people have a lot of nightmares from this quest. Let me know in the comments below if you actually got to try this quest, and if so, if you beat it or not, because I'm kind of curious. Next up, we're going into the 3rd generation sort of trio of Fanged Beasts, which are all using the same skeleton. This first one is Arzuros. His name in Japanese is Aoashira, and his nickname is Seiyuju, which means the Blue Bear Beast, pretty much as you know and see it. Fun fact, this monster almost made me quit Monster Hunter. As you guys may or may not know, Monster Hunter obviously has been a social phenomenon here in Japan, and I knew of it, but I never actually gave it a shot until Monster Hunter 3G came out, and I gave it an honest shot, and the game doesn't tell you anything, so I was using the starter weapon, which was like yellow sharpness, like not at a point where you're supposed to be fighting monsters with it. You're supposed to upgrade it, but I didn't know that. And the first monster I ran into was this one, and I kept hitting it over and over and getting hit by it, and I couldn't get anywhere in the game, and I was not having a very good time. Told a coworker, you know what, I think I'm just gonna give up. I don't think this game's for me, and he kindly walked me through the idea of the core gameplay loop, and I caught on, and before you knew it, I was hooked. In Monster Hunter Generations, it did get a deviant, which is a special type of variant monster. This one is called the Red Helm Arzuros. In Japanese, they do use a very colorful word, unlike them just affixing subspecies onto a name. And for this one, it's Red Beni Kabuto, which means the Crimson Helm. So pretty much the same as English, but remember they are dealing with character length restrictions, so I imagine that's why they went for the shorter Red Helm. And also this plays in well with the fun fact here, which is Ichinose, who is the director. He said that the reason why they chose the color and this theme for the monster is because in Japan at least, his generation, they always had this image that the red bear was the strongest of them all, so he just wanted to go with a really straightforward concept. Let's make it a really strong version, so instead of a blue bear, it's a red one. Next up for the second type of the third generation Fanged Beast is Logombi, or Urukususu in Japanese. Its nickname is Hakutoju, which means the white rabbit beast. This thing's adorable, isn't it? And my fun fact for this one is actually outside of the main series. We have an arcade game machine, or we used to, called Monster Hunter Spirits. And it gave you sort of a look at what sort of the adolescent baby versions of the monsters might have looked like. I don't think it's considered canon, even though it was made by Capcom. But look at this cute, adorable baby Logombi. And just think of how many parents you killed. Shame on you. Just like Arzuros in Monster Hunter Generations, it did get a deviant as well, probably the first one that you faced, and this is called the Snow Baron Logombi. Look at him with that colossal sort of snowball. The prefix which they're using in the Japanese name is Oyuki Nushi. Oyuki just means like O meaning large or big, Yuki meaning snow, so like you can call it what you want, like the large snow, the avalanche, the blizzard, whatever. Nushi just means sort of like the lord or the apex of the area, so he's the lord of big snow. And fun fact here is that this is my second favorite deviant set. Part 3, I believe, we'll be going over the crabs, which you'll see my favorite deviant armor set, but this is my second favorite, and check out the official concept art for this one. I think it's adorable. Next up is everybody's apparently not so favorite. I love this monster, but apparently a lot of people don't. The armadillo pill bug kind of shaped thing called Volvidon. In Japanese, it's got a cute name called Ranguro Tora, and its nickname is Sekikoju, which means the red-shelled beast. Fun fact for this one is that although it plays incredibly different from Arzuros and Logombi, it uses the same skeletal frame for both those monsters, so you can see how much they can really do with these things when they apply game design to it. It's pretty amazing. Next up is one of the flagship monsters for Monster Hunter Generations, which is Gameth. In Japanese, the name is Gamuto, and this nickname is nice and basic, just Kyoju, which means the colossal beast. And indeed, it's like one of the largest monsters they have at Monster Hunter, and too large to the fact that they can't get it to return in other games. So I'm hoping that they found a solve for this for Monster Hunter Wilds, because I definitely want to see it back. Fun fact for this one, it is the only female flagship monster that we know of at this point. Rathian, I know, is on top of the franchise Monster Hunter 1 logo, but is not considered the flagship of that game. The male part, which is Rathalos, is considered the flagship. But they did come out and say that the Gameth here is definitely the female one of the species, and protecting her young from the predatory Tigrex. So yeah, pretty nice that we have some confirmation on that. Also makes me wonder what a male Gameth would look like. In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, it did get a deviant called the Elder Frost Gameth. This has a really cool Japanese nickname, which is Ginre, which means the Silver Ridge, because this thing sticks out as if it's like a snowy mountain ridge. Fun fact for this one is that this monster is the developer, Capcom's revenge, for players exploiting the hind legs of the regular Gameth. They said they designed a fight for Gameth where you'd be watching out for its trunk, all the different stuff in front of its face, but of course players will always choose the path of least resistance and found themselves often just sitting behind its hind legs and exploiting that and doing a lot of damage. So they made it sure that this one does not take a lot of damage from its hind legs. It's dangerous around there, does AoE attacks which will turn freeze to you, and all sorts of stuff. So this was sort of their hate reply to players, and I thought it was hilarious, and it definitely plays different than the regular Gameth. Next up is one of the more favorite names to say, which is Kechawacha. In Japanese it's the same, it's Kechawacha, and its nickname is Kienko, which means the curious or strange monkey fox. which it definitely moves like. You can see that it's got those big ears and swings around like a monkey. And fun fact for this one is that the producer Tsujimoto-san, who we affectionately call Tsuji P, calls him the sort of aerial, sort of elevation combat teacher, sensei. Because this is really the first monster that took advantage of the verticality that they added into the series in Monster Hunter 4, and so, you know, it's iconic for that, really teaching you about going up, going below, and dealing with that. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, it did get a subspecies called the Ashen Kechawacha, in Japanese just Kechawacha Ashu, and its nickname is Hakuenko, which means the white monkey fox. Fun fact, when this thing gets enraged, it'll use its ears like a shield and cover up its head. Normally it's pretty tough on the normal Kechawacha, but for this one it's like really tough. Even if you have purple sharpness, your weapon's going to be bouncing off because barely any damage gets through. Next up from Monster Hunter Rise is Bishaten, in Japanese is Bishu Tengo, and its nickname is Tenguju, which means the Tengu Beast. In case you guys don't know, in Japanese folklore, and I'll be doing this for most of the Rise monsters because I saw some requests for it in the comments of part 1, but I'll be going over who they're based on. And for Rise, the motif for this one was Tengu, which is a Japanese figure in mythology, and the Tengu, here's a little teaser picture that Ichinose drew to tease it on Twitter. Then in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, it did get a subspecies called the Blood Orange Bishaten, just Bishu Tengo Ashu, and its nickname here is Akatenguju. You'll notice with a lot of the Rise and Sunbreak monsters, they have 4 kanji characters for their nickname. That's just, it's a very classical Japanese way of doing it for something that sounds like folklore, and just having them all sort of lined up like that is just cool and interesting. The fun fact for this one is this is based off of the Crow Tengu. You could definitely notice it with the overall silhouette and design of its beak and stuff like that. And next up we have another monster from Monster Hunter Rise, which is Gos Harag. In Japanese his name is Goshahagi, and his nickname is Sekkiju. This means the snow, Seki. Ki, which is just for Oni, which is the Japanese name for like a demon. Not quite the same as a demon, which is why we just use the word Oni. And Beast. Fun fact for this one is that it's based off of Namahage, which is the iconic red and blue Oni that you might see in different Japanese things. So when you see this monster, he's blue. When he gets red, he turns red. You know what? I'm just going to leave that in the edit. Yeah, when he turns red, he's red, of course. What I meant to say was when he's enraged, he turns red. So he's a pretty much spot-on, one-for-one inspiration from these cool little Onis. Next up from Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is Garangolm. Garangolm. I don't know how to pronounce that properly. Japanese name is Garangoromu, and its nickname is Gotenju, which means the strongly or fortifiedly clad beast, which he most certainly is. The director Suzuki-san did mention in an interview how they sort of based, you know, Rise was all about basing it off of Japanese yokai, and so they wanted to go for Western sort of ghouls and ghosts as their design motifs for Rise. So you had stuff like Dracula, the werewolf, and this one is based off of Frankenstein's monster. Now I did get a few comments to try to stay away from monsters announced for Monster Hunter Wilds, but I think with a demo being out, it kind of makes it official, at least the monsters included in it. So, you know, I'll stick up until the most recent trailer, but anything that's announced beyond this or whatever, like, I'll stay away from. So I apologize if you've been trying to be completely void from anything relating to Wilds. But we do have a new Fanged Beast called Doshaguma. In Japanese, it's the same, Doshaguma. Its nickname is actually a pretty difficult one to describe. It's Byakuju. Byaku here refers to sort of like a pioneer, something that goes open and goes into wide open territory, discovers new lands, and I think what they're trying to refer to here is that it's a pack animal that likes to roam through the sand dunes and find new territory, and that's probably why they're getting in fights with the Balahara and other monsters like that. Honestly, even playing the Monster Hunter Wilds beta, I don't have a fun fact for this monster. It is what it is. So I'll just say yes, it was the first official alpha pack monster that they announced for the Monster Hunter series, because that's a new feature coming in Wilds. And then finally, in the last trailer, they did release information on one more Fanged Beast, which is Ajarakan. Ajarakan? I have no idea how they're going to pronounce that. In Japanese, it's Ajarakan, so same way. And its nickname is Kakuenju, which means the shining or glistening monkey beast. I believe this is probably using the model from Rajan for its base, but who knows, maybe I could be wrong. And fun fact here is I just think that this is probably the most detailed hand model I've ever seen for a Monster Hunter render for a monster. Also interesting noting that it doesn't have nails. It seems like it's definitely got them trimmed down so it can grip and run across all these hot beams and stuff like that. So yeah, very interesting to fight this monster, and in the trailer I believe there was 2. So maybe this is a pack monster for that region. Okay, that's it for the Fanged Beasts, and we'll be going into our second category, which are the Bird Wyverns, also called Choryushu in Japanese. These are a little bit harder, so we're going to go through them pretty fast. It's just that these monsters are generally small little body frames of monsters. They've got beaks, they're bipedal, they'll run at you, and they're generally used as intro to early mid-game monsters in the game. So there's not a lot of notable stuff to say about half of them, but the other half are really cool and quite iconic, so we'll definitely talk about those. Okay, to start things out, I'm going to go over the raptors. Now, they don't call them specifically raptors or group them in the game like this, but in the Chinese translation for Monster Hunter Online, and I believe Stories 2, they do use Sokuryu as sort of like a nickname, which just means swift wyvern, which would make sense for a raptor. But these are real, like, just the leaders of the trash mobs. Like, these are nothing, these are like the very first monsters we're going to fight in the game. They're just quick, nimble, and annoying. And they generally make some pretty good weapons to get you out of your starter. So here's the list, but we're going to go through them one by one. Starting things out is Gendrome. In Japanese is Dosu Geneposu. Here, Dosu is kind of the prefix that they use for great, which you'll notice as we get into the dog wyverns later. But Dosu Geneposu is the name, and of course he's the leader of the Genprey. Fun fact for him is that he was actually able to be frenzied in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. For being such a weak early monster, it's kind of funny to see them getting a frenzy version, but sure enough he did. Next up is the Velocidrome, which in Japanese is Dosadampos, and it's the leader of the Dampos, which are the Velociprey. Not a lot for fun facts, but I did notice that in my research that they generally have 1 or 2 Velocidromes, which are the male sort of alphas, as part of the pack, and usually Velocidromes travel in packs of about 10 to 20, so a pretty healthy size, a very societally based animal. Of course, in the game, I think you'll generally have like 2 small Velocipreys and then 1 larger Velocidrome on you, maybe 3, but not much more than that. Continuing on, we have Eodrome. In Japanese, his name is Dos Iosu. This is the leader of the pack for the Iosu, which is the Eoprey. This thing is a status ailment monster, so very annoying, which is why its fun fact is that it was ranked 227 out of 228 in the 20th anniversary popularity poll. Yikes. Yeah, this monster, it's cool, but it's annoying because it spits poison at you and is just generally a nuisance in marsh-like areas. Even more niche is the Giadrome, which is Dos Gianos, and that's the leader of the pack for the Giaprey, or Gianos in Japanese. And the fun fact for this monster is that it actually had its model changed from Monster Hunter Freedom, or Monster Hunter Portable if you're playing in Japanese, to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, or Portable Second. They changed the color of its claws from red to blue. Not sure why they did that, but interesting change nonetheless. Okay, now that we covered these small raptors, now we have the dog wyverns, Kuryu. Great Jaggy is sort of like the flagship staple for this series, but these are 4 different monsters which act very much like dogs in the way that they'll howl, they'll bark, they are very territorial, and they do share similar Japanese nicknames. You'll see that sort of Kuryu come up a lot, and in English they'll generally affix the word great to the front of them, so that's where that comes from. So the first and most important, of course, is the Great Jaggy, which is Dos Jaggy. In Japanese, its nickname is just Kuryu, or the dog wyvern, and the fun fact for this one is that it's actually the most beloved of all the different of these types of wyverns. It's obviously, its face is used in multiple games for different accessories, furniture, stuff like that. I think it's just a combination of the simplicity of the monster, it doesn't have a status ailment, and just that, you know, really interesting frilled crest, and just the howling barks that it makes it just a very cute monster. And also was a really good sort of tutorial monster for a lot of people who picked up Monster Hunter 4. Next up is its not as popular, Great Baggy. This is Dos Baggy in Japanese, so pretty much the same name. The nickname here is Minkuryu, which means it's a sleeping or sleep dog wyvern because it'll put you to sleep. And fun fact, this thing, unlike Jaggy, who came in 68th place, ranked just 224 out of 229, so yeah, status ailment inducing beginning to mid-turn monsters, not very memorable. Next one is the Great Rogi, or Dos Frogi. Frogi, I always laugh. It's interesting that they call them that. Its nickname is Dokukuryu, and Doku means poison, and Kuryu for the dog wyvern. And fun fact for this, if you want to cosplay as my friend and fellow co-host of the Third Fleet podcast and YouTuber himself, Rurikan, the hat from the Great Rogi, it has that sort of like Crocodile Dundee type of like outdoor kind of feel to it, so perfect for doing a cosplay of his character. Then for Monster Hunter Generations, we have the Great Macau. In Japanese is Dos Macau, and this is Chokuryu, which means the Leaping Dog Wyvern. Fun fact for this one, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name, but it seems to be based on sort of the intermediary species between dinosaur and bird, sort of a primeval bird, and that was the base model and inspiration for this monster. Next up, it's not technically part of the same sort of Dosu series, like the Great Whatever Dog Wyverns, but we do have the Great Izuchi. Its name in Japanese is Osa Izuchi, and its nickname is Renyuryu, which is the Sickle Weasel Wyvern. Fun fact for this one is that it's based off of the Kamaitachi yokai, and it has a different prefix in Japanese than the English one, so where you might think that this goes like Great Jaggy, Great Baggy, Great Izuchi, it's similar in sound, but they're using a different word in Japanese, which is Osa instead of Dosu, and it just made it feel very different, very Japanese, right? Because that was the theme of Monster Hunter Rise, so just want to point that out because it's not technically nicknamed a dog wyvern, although in English the naming convention is pretty much the same, and in-game it functions pretty much the same as well. Next up, the bird, the myth, the legend, Yankuku, or in Japanese, Yankuku. Its nickname is Kaicho, which just means strange or weird bird, which it most definitely is. And his fun fact is that, of course, we call him the sensei in Monster Hunter, or the teacher. He's very much the idol mascot of the series, I would say, or at least one of them. Featured in pretty much every game and tons of iconography. It's dubbed the sensei because in Japan at least, second generation and first generation, but mostly second generation is when this series really took off. And Yankuku was sort of taking the helm as the first large monster that would really give players a challenge and teach them how to play the game. Like, what is a large monster? What are the different attack patterns? How do they act when you're at different distance? What do they do when they're enraged? How do you deal with their speed? It really is, in my opinion, to this day, the best tutorial monster in the idea that just the balance, right? Like, some of the new monsters like Chatakabra are cute and all, but they're really easy, at least in the demo for Wilds, where Yankuku is not a pushover. It's actually a pretty tough monster, can hit you really hard, and it really gives you that satisfaction when you finally take it down. Breaking, of course, its beak is tough, but when you do it, you can make weapons and stuff out of it. So, yeah, I think it will forever be the best sensei, and I really hope that other players get to experience it in a way that it pops up early game, because it really is just a well-designed monster. In Japanese, we'll either call it sensei or kuku sensei. I have seen some people actually just spell it out Yankuku sensei, but usually when you say sensei, people know exactly who you're referring to in terms of Monster Hunter. So it's kind of funny that its subspecies, the blue Yankuku, or Yankuku Ashu, which is nicknamed Aokaicho, which is just the blue strange bird, really isn't popular at all. So I believe they mislabeled, or at least they retconned it, where Yangaruga was being introduced around the same time. And people sort of looked at that as like the subspecies for Yankuku and very unique. So the blue one just seemed like a palette swap, just a difference in color, nothing that much different. I think their AI is supposed to be a little bit more clever, and they probably hit harder, but there really wasn't anything memorable for this monster, so I think it's largely forgotten at this point. Certainly not forgotten, of course, is the aforementioned Yangaruga, or in Japanese, Yangaruga. Its nickname is Kokurocho, super cool name, which means the black wolf bird. Fun fact for this is that the variant for this monster appeared before the actual base monster, so we'll be getting to him next, but the Scarred Yangaruga predates Yangaruga, and then was later classified as a variant of this species. So yeah, Yangaruga, very like almost metallic robotic screams, need those earplugs and charging at you and hitting you hard, super iconic. The variant, the Scarred Yangaruga, or Kizutsuita Yangaruga. Kizu just means like a mark or scar, and Tsuita just means that you have it, you have one on you. And the fun fact for this one is, and I was not into Monster Hunter back then, but its first appearance was actually as an Easter egg in Monster Hunter Portable, like first generation. There was just one quest where you had to slay a bunch of like Velociprey, and in Area 10 of the map, boom, 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 all of a sudden you got this unannounced monster who's brand new, own theme song, hits like a truck, and you're supposed to probably just run away from it. I don't think they ever expected anybody to be able to kill it because of the 20-minute timer and everything, but I think a few people have. But that must have been super memorable, right? Like, that's way back in the day when you can get away with that. Like, put all that production cost into a monster only to not announce it and only have it appear in like one quest. That's pretty mythical, and I imagine must be super iconic for people who play the game back then. For those of us who enjoyed Yangaruga afterwards, we did get a deviant for it in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate called the Deadeye Yangaruga. I love the English name here because the Japanese name, the prefix is Sekigan. So Sekigan Yangaruga, which means the one-eyed Yangaruga. Deadeye can refer to both its incredible aim, because it does shoot at you really fast, also because it has one dead eye. Fun fact here is Sekiro, the game, this is the same kanji that you would use for Seki, which means when you have a pair of something, it just means one, like maybe like a lone or just a single. So he's kind of like the lone wolf or single wolf, or the one-armed wolf, because he has got a prosthetic arm. Like, there's a lot of different interpretations of what you can mean by Seki there in that context. And yeah, so Professor Deadeye was definitely the best way for us Prowlers to level up. So if you notice a lot of rooms in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate with Prowlers, it's generally going to be beating up the Deadeye Yangaruga because it was just really easy to do with boomerangs and provided a ton of experience points. Next up, we got the good old rubber chicken who likes to play dead and then pounces on you when you try to carve it, which is Gypceros. In Japanese, his name is Gerios, and the nickname is Dokukaicho, which means the poisonous or poisoned strange bird. Fun fact, because it is made of a rubbery hide, like quite literally, which is not a conductor of electricity, you cannot use a shock trap on this monster. It'll just run straight over it. Like Rajang, I really like monsters that interact with traps differently. I think it's just an extra cool little element that keeps you on your toes. It does actually have a subspecies called the purple Gypceros, or Gerios ashu, with the nickname of Shidokucho, which just means the purple poison bird. Honestly, just another kind of disappointing, like, stronger version of the original monster, but the fun fact for this one applies to the base monster as well, which is they use a light crystal on top of their head to sort of do like a flashbang. And if you break that off their head, not only do you get a chance of earning a light crystal in the rewards, but it also stops them from being able to flash the room. They'll still try, but nothing will come out, and it'll just be a huge opening for you. Next up is Hypnocutris, or however you want to pronounce it. In Japanese, his name is Hipnoku, and the nickname is Mincho, which means the sleep or sleeping bird because he will spit at you and make you fall asleep, sometimes over and over again in a loop, which is never fun. Now, where Espinas is definitely the first case of a major Monster Hunter Frontier monster being brought into the mainline series, Hypnocutris is also another one, as well as Leviathans, which appear in Frontier and are sort of said to be like Frontier monsters that made their debut in Frontier first and then made their way into the main series. But they did do an interview where they clarified that this monster and Leviathans were actually in development and at the same time. So the teams for the main series game that they were working on and the Frontier team kind of worked together to come up with a concept that wasn't too different so that it couldn't appear in both games. So while it did get released in Frontier first, it was actually planned quite some time before for the main series game as well. So it's not technically the first like Frontier design monster because they have a very different and interesting design philosophy for their monsters, but just one that debuted there. So interesting fun fact if you care about that kind of stuff. If you picked up Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, no doubt you remember and probably miss Kurupeko, which the Japanese name is Kurupeko, so pretty much the same. the nickname Saicho, which means the colorful bird. Fun fact here is that this monster, its base sort of characteristics is that it can use its crazy lungs and beak to just mimic the sounds of cries of other monsters. So when it does a call out, you don't know who it's calling. It could be another monster, it could be a Deviljho even. There is one quest, I believe it was an event quest, where it was 100% guaranteed that it would call a Deviljho to the field, which when you're like early mid-game fighting a Carapaceon and all of a sudden you hear that sound from Deviljho coming in, it's not fun. So a lot of people, it created great panic. You know, you had this sort of like time constraint. You want to stop him from howling and calling a monster. So I hope they bring it back in Wilds. It's such a fantastically fun monster with such a really funny gimmick. In Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, it actually did get a subspecies called the Crimson Carapaceon, or Carapaceon Ashu. It's named just Beni Saicho. You might recognize that Beni, we've seen that a lot for Crimson. And the real difference here was that this thing had a much tougher hide, so you could bounce off a lot, and instead of doing fire sparks by clapping its wings together, it did electricity. Fun fact for this monster is when it debuted, if you look at its icon, it had sort of like a blue sac that it sort of gathers its breath and does its calls out with, but it's never been blue. It's always been red, just like the regular species. I don't know if they made that icon just a mistake. Maybe they changed it midway through development. Maybe they just wanted to make sure on the small portable screen that it looked different from the regular species, but they've never fixed it. Even in Monster Hunter Stories 2, where the monster appears, they're still using that blue sort of sac when it should be red, which I just think is hilarious. Next up, we've got Malfestio. Very nice name. In Japanese, this is a mouthful, but it's Hororo Horuru is the name, and his nickname is Yacho, the nocturnal bird. Fun fact here is that the Japanese is actually a wordplay from Kuroro Horumu, which is chloroform, like phonetically spelled out in Japanese katakana, which of course is one of the scientific, chemical compounds that can put your body to sleep, and also combining in the sound, the onomatopoeia for a howling owl, which is ho ho ho, and combines it to make a really memorable and interesting name. But I gotta admit, I love the English name as well. Malfestio is super cool and catchy. In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, it also got a deviant, which is called the Night Cloak Malfestio. The special name that they're using in Japanese for the prefix here is Oboro Gakure, which means the hidden nocturnal Malfestio. And the fun fact here, and this is just random as all heck, but in one of their reveals that they did in Japanese media and Famitsu and those magazines, they actually had another nickname for this one, which was the Twilight Juggler. Why they didn't use that in the game, I don't know, but it is official, so I thought I'd share it here. Now going into Monster Hunter Rise, we had Aknosom, which is Akinoshirimu in Japanese. Its nickname is Sancho, the umbrella bird. San here being the kanji for umbrella and Cho for bird. Fun fact, this one is based on the Kasa Obake, which is a yokai here in Japanese folklore, which is basically a single leg umbrella. So if you notice, Aknosom will stand on one leg and definitely uses its beak and its sort of mane, very much like an umbrella in the game. Moving into Monster Hunter World territory, we've got Kuruyaku. Japanese name is Kuruyaku. Its nickname Solcho just means the scratching bird because he's always scratching at the ground and digging up stuff like rocks and eggs. Fun fact, and I'll leave a URL for this in the description down below because I don't want to get copyright struck, but there was a wonderfully hilarious commercial for Monster Hunter World when it came out here in Japan, which many of you've probably seen, which had the actor doing the best impression of a Kuruyaku that you could possibly do. Next up, we have the hard to pronounce Tsitsiyaku. In Japanese, it's Tsitsiyaku, so very much the same name. Its nickname is Gencho, which means the dazzling bird. Dazzling here because it does use its frills to make sort of like a flashbang of light, which will dazzle and stun all the different monsters around it, including the Shamos and the hunters. And the fun fact for this one is that if you look at the sort of scientific family chart of the monsters, which they published usually in the encyclopedias, but most recently in the Iceborne one, this is a different genus, but it is under the Ku family. So the Kuku family of monsters, so it is a kind of close relative of Yankuku, although not a direct relative or cousin, but closely related. I think that's pretty interesting because you'd think something like Yangaruga was when it's not, but Tsitsiyaku is. So I think in English, instead of Kuku, they're using Ku for sort of that scientific denotion. And coming near the end, we have Puke Puke from Monster Hunter World. In Japanese, the same name, Puke Puke, and its nickname is Doku Yocho. Doku meaning poison, and Yocho meaning something like bewitching bird or something like that. Fun fact here is that if you don't just go in there swinging and you actually watch it, the poison that it spits from its mouth gains some special different attributes depending on what vegetation it was eating before it spat at you, which I always thought was a really nice little detail that they added in. And the final bird wyvern is Coral Puke Puke, a subspecies for the monster which was added in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In Japanese, just Puke Puke Ashu, and its nickname just changes out the poison for water and calls it Suyocho, which means the water bewitching bird. Fun fact for this one is that if you don't count the fact this was not released in the West, but Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, where they introduced the Crimson Kurapeko, this is the first time in like a decade almost that they introduced a subspecies for a bird wyvern, which is cool because again, bird wyverns generally are smaller frame monsters that appear in the early to early mid game, so they're not the type of monsters that you would want to dedicate a lot of resources to be giving subspecies to. Or when they have done it, you notice that a lot of the subspecies really don't take off. So always cool to see that. I hope that, you know, in a future Monster Hunter game, they'll have a bird wyvern that's more late game, sort of like Yangaruga was. That could definitely get a subspecies and become more memorable. But until now, we'll just have to wait and see if Monster Hunter Wilds will introduce or bring back any bird wyverns. But this is our full list as of November 3rd, 2024. To start things off, we're going to go with the frogs, which are the amphibians, in Japanese also known as Ryoseishu. I'm not going to include characteristics because it's pretty self-explanatory, but our first one and most iconic one is Tetsukabura. In Japanese, it's Tetsukabura, and his nickname is Onigairu, which means demon frog. Fun fact, its moves, such as its single leg raise and stomp, were modeled off of that of a sumo wrestler. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, it did get a subspecies called the Berserk Tetsukabura. In Japanese, of course, Ashu means subspecies, so it's just Tetsukabura Ashu. Its nickname is Ara Onigairu. Ara means violent or rough, and then Onigairu for the demon frog. As with most subspecies, they're basically added into the ultimate versions of the games and are generally more challenging or take one characteristic of the monster and dial it up. Fun fact for this one, its nickname and even its appearance and sort of how it moves is modeled off of the over-the-top style of kabuki called Aragoto. This beloved froggy also got a deviant in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate called the Drilled Tusk Tetsukabura. Its nickname in Japanese is Iwa Ugachi, which means rock piercing or rock piercer Tetsukabura. And fun fact for this one, and I did not have these unlocked in the English version to check what they are, but the titles that you earn for hunting like 30, 40, and 50 of this monster are all related to kabuki. You've got stuff like actor, you've got the actual word kabuki, and then really funny, I believe the one for hunting 50 of this monster is something like shy. I don't know why they chose shy, but it's pretty funny. Moving on, we have Zamtrios, which in Japanese is called Zabura Zagiru, and its nickname is Bagezame, which means the shape-shifting shark. Fun fact, and another reason to get hyped for Monster Hunter Wilds, is that the main composer for this monster, its song was Miwako Chinone, and she did the theme song for Monster Hunter Wilds, and I'm very interested to see how much other songs that she's doing for this title. Our favorite balloon shark also got a subspecies called the Tiger Stripe Zamtrios, Japanese just Zabura Zagiru Ashu, and its nickname is Torazame, which means the tiger shark. I'm really happy I had a render here to show you just how gelatinous and hilarious it is when it inflates. In retrospect, since this is sandwiched between like frog-like creatures, this really is kind of a no-brainer. But being a shark, it was interesting that at Festa 2013, Kaname said that they did reference frogs with sort of the way that it blows up into this circular ball. Moving on, we have Rurikan's favorite chunky boy, Tetranodon. In Japanese, his name is Yotsumi Wado, and its nickname is Kappagairu. Kappa, which if you're familiar with Japanese anime or manga may be familiar with, is a very well-known sort of water imp type of yokai. And bonus points if you get the reference here in this picture. And our final amphibian is one coming up in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is Chatakabura. In Japanese, it's the same name, Chatakabura, and its nickname here is Matoi Gairu. Matoi means to sort of be clad or have stuff sort of like built up on you. And this just denotes the fact that it sort of licks its arms and applies the rocks around the area so that he can pummel you, which he really didn't do in the demo. I think he was the one getting pummeled. Fun fact for him is this guy actually has an itsy bitsy teeny weeny tail if you look close enough. Moving on to our next type is the Snake Wyvern. We only have one variation of this so far, so hopefully they'll add more in Monster Hunter Wilds, but this is called in Japanese Jaryushu. This new monster type was introduced in Monster Hunter 4 with Najarala. In Japanese, the name is Garara Ajara, which is kind of like an onomatopoeia for the rattling of a snake, and its nickname is Kodaru, which basically means the constricting snake wyvern, because of course it will circle you, constrict, and try to squeeze you to death. Fun fact for this, if you have Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate still on your 3DS, if you mount this monster, in most cases it'll actually put the camera behind your hunter, leading to some really spicy gameplay footage, if you know what I mean. This awesome new monster also got a subspecies in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate called the Tidal Najarala. In Japanese, just Garara Ajara Ashu, and its nickname is Suidaru, which is the water snake wyvern. Fun fact for this one, it was the only subspecies in 4 Ultimate that could go apex. Definitely memorable, at least from my end. Let me know down below if you guys like this monster as well. I know a lot of people are mixed on it. The next one, we have just another soul monster, which is the Lynian type. I hope I pronounce it right. In Japanese, it's Jujinshu, which is like a beast person. And this one appeared in Monster Hunter Freedom and Freedom Unite, and it's the King Shakalaka. In Japanese, its name is Kingu Chachabu. Chachabu is the name for Shakalaka in Japanese, and the nickname is Kimen-O. Kimen is just sort of like strange or odd mask, and then O for king. So he is the leader of the tribe, so to say. He was actually just a hidden variant of a Shakalaka in Monster Hunter DOS, but it was classified as an actual monster, like a boss monster, in Monster Hunter Freedom and Freedom Unite. I actually don't think I've ever fought this monster, so I really hope they bring it back. If anything, I think it would just be funny because it's only really appeared in 2nd generation. Hope you don't have arachnophobia, because next up is the Temnocerans, which in Japanese is Kyokakushu. This monster type also debuted in Monster Hunter 4, and it debuted with Nerscylla. In Japanese, the name is Neruskura, and the nickname is Kagigumo, which means shadow spider. Fun fact about this monster is if you look on its legs, it's actually wearing the hide of one of its prey, which is that of a Gypceros. If you thought that was creepy, we have a desert sort of variation, which is a subspecies called the Shrouded Nerscylla. In Japanese, it's Neruskura Ashu, and its nickname is Mukurogumo, which means the skeleton or bone spider. Fun fact, this thing is indeed wearing that, the hide of a Kezu. Apparently they sort of went out and hunted Kezu and brought back its hide to wear, which because of its moisture and water reholding capabilities, allows this spider to thrive in the desert. Finally, in Monster Hunter Rise, we got a new spider in the series called the Rachna Kadaki. In Japanese, the name is Yatsukadaki, and its nickname is Kisakigumo, which means the queen spider. So I can't say she here, and it's correct. Fun fact about this one is that the motif for this one is from Jorogumo, which is a famous Japanese yokai, which is a spider who controls its young to do nefarious things. In Sunbreak, this spider also got a subspecies called the Pyre Rachna Kadaki, in Japanese just Yatsukadaki Ashu, its nickname being the Shikigumo, which means the Pyro Queen Spider. Fun fact, this is not a very nice mother spider because she will send out her small little tarantulas and command them to blow up in order to damage the hunters, so if you're the child of this thing, you are just fodder. And upcoming in Monster Hunter Wilds, we are getting a new spider, which is Lalabarina. In Japanese, it's Labarabarina, and the nickname is Shikakumo, which means the piercing flower spider. Fun fact for this one is that its name is quite a combination of different things. It seems to be from Indonesian for spider, which is laba-laba, bara, which is rose in Japanese, and then, of course, the word ballerina, which it dances around like. Okay, now that we're done with amphibians and snakes and spiders, now it's time to move on to the insects, which is the Neopterons. In Japanese, this is Kolchushu. This type was first introduced in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite with the Vespoid Queen. In Japanese, it's called Queen Langosta, Langosta being what we call Vespoids in Japanese, and the nickname just Jookchu, which means the queen insect or queen bug. Fun fact is you had to kill like 25 to 30 Vespoids in order to get the queen to appear apparently. I actually have not fought this monster just like the King Shakalaka, so let me know down in the comments if this was either like worth coming back or if it was just kind of like a fun little thing. You might be noticing a theme with a lot of these more unique monster types in that Monster Hunter 4 really is the one that blew the lid off of them. So the Neopterons, not just the Kinsect with the insect glaive, also made pretty much a resurgence back into the series with Monster Hunter 4, starting with Celtis. In Japanese, its name is Aruserutasu, and its nickname is Tekolchu, which means the piercing shell bug. The fun fact for this one is that sort of the concept of this thing was just a flying lance, so no wonder it pierces through armors and hunters alike. It also got a subspecies in 4 Ultimate called the Desert Celtis, just Aruserutasu Ashu, and its nickname is Fukolchu, which means the axe armor bug. Fun fact is this thing is tied with Steel Uragan for the least favorite monster in the entire series according to the 20th anniversary poll. I think people just don't remember it. Now the male Celtis might be a small little fry, but the queen is not. Celtis queen is a huge one who uses its husband as sort of cannon fodder. Quite literally, its name is Generu Serutasu in Japanese with the nickname Ju Kolchu, which means the heavy shell bug. Fun fact is she will brutally smash the males to death and feed off of them. So not only does she use them as weapons, she also uses them as food. Not a good time if you are the male Celtis. Where there is a desert Celtis, there is a desert Celtis queen, of course. This is just Generu Serutasu Ashu, and it's the subspecies that appeared in 4 Ultimate, and its nickname is the Hokolchu, which means the cannon shell bug. She will grab that male and shoot him off like a cannon. The original localization team apparently had proposed the idea of calling it like the Celtis Reaper or the Dread Queen, but the development team just kind of decided that was too dark and that really wasn't the direction they were going for, so they went more for the environment and the coloring of the monsters. Actually, it ended up working good because we do get a Dread Queen later in the series, which is of course Rathian. And imagine our surprise when Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate's final online Gathering Hall boss was not an Elder Dragon, it was a Neopteron called Atal-Ka. In Japanese, the name is Atoraru-Ka, and the nickname is Kakutoro, which means the royalty or royal mantis. Fun fact for her is if you've done the fight, she does sort of command a huge sort of beast. It's just a collection of rubble and steel and stuff like that. She controls it with her golden silk. And makes it sort of like a moving fortress, and that actually has a name called the Atal Neset. However, that's not really a monster, as it's just an inanimate object that she's able to control. Seriously, she's one of the best monsters in the series, so if you want an excuse to go and play Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on Switch before Wilds comes out, like, do it for Atal-Ka. Okay, from bugs, we're now moving on to fish. This is the Piscine Wyvern, I believe it's pronounced, and in Japanese it's Gyoryushu. And I know who's on your mind already, but we're going to start out with the Cephadrome, which is Dos Gareos in Japanese, and its nickname is very simply Sadyu, which means the Sand Wyvern. Fun fact, this one actually appears to be modeled off of a real-life ancient creature called the Diplocaulus. Okay, I will waste no time, we've got to get to Plesioth. Plesioth is the most well-known of these types of fish wyverns, and for good reason. Its Japanese name is Ganon Totosu, and its nickname is just Suiryu, which means the water wyvern. A fun fact for this, that I could do an entire video on this monster, and in fact I might if they decide to bring it back in Monster Hunter Wilds, but this is the ultimate troll monster for the entire series. We have a long history of different things that happens with this monster, the most famous of course being if you Google hitbox, you'll notice that the vertical, sort of horizontal hitbox for this monster is like a mile long. If it does a hip check, you can be, 10,000 feet away and it'll still hit you. At least that's how it was in the older games. It also had like some bad issues with a lot of the older games, where if you killed it and it was in water, it would just float there dead and you wouldn't be able to get to it and carve it. Then you had World Tours, which is kind of the Japanese nickname for like when a Rathalos just circles the sky forever before coming down, or For example, the Plesioth will just start swimming around and the AI just decides, I'm just going to keep swimming, and you're just sitting there waiting for it to jump on land so you can actually fight the darn thing. But honestly, a fish with long legs is about as iconic as you can get for something hilarious to hunt. I really hope it does come back. This evil creature actually has a subspecies called the green Plesioth, which is just Ganototosu ashu. Its nickname is Midori Suiryu, which means the jade or green water wyvern. For this one, it's just more aggressive. When it gets really upset, enraged, it will go on land instead of being in water, and it will go full on like Rathian. It will just try to trample and stomp you to death. Next up is Leviathans. If you remember from the previous video, I believe it was part 2, we talked about Hypnocatrus, which was a monster that was developed for the Frontier series and the mainline series at the same time. Same deal here with Leviathans. Japanese name is Voroganosu, which I love. Nickname is Yoganryu, which means the Molten Rock Wyvern. Fun one for this one, their working sort of development nickname, placeholder name, was just the Magma Plesioth, and honestly if you fight it, you'll know exactly why. Next up in Monster Hunter Worlds, we did get the return of this type of monster with Juratodus, which in Japanese is Juratodosu. If you notice, the Todosu is very similar to the naming convention used for Plesioth in the previous monster. Its nickname is Dorogyoryu, which means the mud fish wyvern because it swims and hides in the mud. Fun fact for this one is that I might do a bonus video actually at the end of this bestiary covering sort of like the scientific sort of family tree. But this fish wyvern is considered to be a little bit more prehistoric than the other ones that we just saw, and you know, I think it shows in its appearance. In Iceborne, we did get one final type, which was the Beotodus. In Japanese, it's Barantodosu. And this one has the nickname of Togyoryu, same pronunciation but different kanji than Gobel. But this just means the frozen fish wyvern. I just noticed a typo, and I'm going to leave it there because it wouldn't be a Gaijin Hunter video without some typos. And strangely enough, for that 20th anniversary favorite monster ranking poll, this thing was the lowest ranked monster from Iceborne. And I feel really bad because I actually really enjoyed this monster a lot. Okay, and now finally on to the most juicy category of monsters in this video, which is the Fanged Wyverns, or Garyushu in Japanese. This was a new type of monster introduced in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd with Zinogre, Jin-Oga in Japanese, with the nickname of Dairoryu, which is the Thunder Wolf Wyvern. Fun fact, honestly, there's so many we can pick from because this is a monster that has as much history as Rathalos. Like this is I mean, it's not first generation, it's third gen, but it is rated the #1 most beloved monster in the entire series. I know I reference this a lot, and I'm going to include a link in the description of this video, but the Monster Hunter 20th anniversary global poll was really interesting because they went through all the different territories and polled everybody on who their favorite monster was. They actually had a breakdown here that was revealed on March 12th on a Japanese YouTube video, which talked about the top 3 for the different regions. Overall, Zinogre got the most votes and won as the world's most favorite monster. And perhaps because Monster Hunter Portable 3rd was never localized for the West, in Japan and Asia it took the crown as the #1 most voted favorite monster. But it did appear on for North and South America. It was the #3rd voted favorite monster, and Europe, I don't know. Europe just decided, who knows, they didn't like him. I joke. He was actually, I believe, in the top 5 or 10. So he had enough votes to win the most favorite monster. So of course, when Zinogre made its return in Monster Hunter 3 and then 3 Ultimate, they decided to make a subspecies called the Stygian Zinogre. In Japanese, it's just Jin-Oga Ashu, and its nickname is super cool. It's Gokuroryu, which means the hellish wolf wyvern. This goes straight into the fun fact, which is they wanted the naming convention to be less about color and theme and more to capture that feeling of the hellhound, because the inspiration behind this monster was the hellhound Cerberus. I love what they did here. Stygian comes from river Styx, which of course is a famous mythology river in the underworld, and I think it just ties thematically really well together. In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, it did get a deviant, which is the Thunderlord Zinogre. In Japanese, the sort of flavor text for this one is King Daiko Jin-Oga, which means the Gold Thunder Duke Zinogre. And, you know, I don't plug my own videos pretty much ever, so I'm going to take the opportunity to do so now, but this was actually used as one of the huge sort of animatronics as part of their Universal Studios Japan Monster Hunter The Real. It was like an attraction. I actually have a vlog, so I'm going to put a link for that in the description below for this video, but do check it out. I find, you know, they do a lot of collaborations with the USJ, and it's interesting just to see what it is. So I went down there with a video camera and vlogged it and sort of took a video of everything so you could see what it looked like. So yeah, check that out. Now, I must say that if a monster was ever due for a rare species, would be Zinogre. So my fingers are crossed that in Wilds we'll have it not only return, but we get a rare species for it. Believe it or not, Zinogre and its subspecies were the only Fanged Wyverns for a long time. I think if you counted it out, it would be something like 7 years until they started reintroducing new types of this type of monster, and starting with World with the Great Jaguarus, which in Japanese is Dos Jagarasu, and its nickname is Zokuryu, which is the Bandit Wyvern. Fun fact for this one is that it belongs in the same genus as the Gyros and Shamos. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with these scientific family trees, it means that they're closely related, but when I say close, we're talking like Homo sapiens, humans, and Neanderthals. Quite far apart, but that would be in the same genus. So yeah, they're related, but they're not quite identical, but it is really interesting to see that relation between the monsters. So again, I think I'll do that as a bonus video after I'm done with this bestiary. So following along, we have a status ailment version sort of this type of monster called the Great Gyros, or Gyros. In Japanese, the name is Dosugiryosu, and the nickname is the Hizokuryu. And the Hizokuryu just means the paralysis banded wyvern, so it adds in the paralysis because that is the status ailment that it inflicts. Fun fact, although it is in the Rotten Vale, it does have gills which apparently will filter out the miasma and allow it to live down there without dying. Next up from World Iceborne, everyone's favorite monster, Dodogama. Not my favorite though. In Japanese it's called Dodogamaru, and its nickname is Ganzokuryu, which means the rock banded wyvern. Although it does say banded wyvern, it's not as related to the Jaguarus as you would think, like the Gyros is. Fun fact for this one is it actually takes in minerals and rocks and absorbs the nutrients in them, and then it spits out as sort of a weapon against monsters around it the excess in its mouth. Which, since it's not digesting anything, does that mean it doesn't poop? Inquiring minds want to know. Next up, also from World Iceborne, is Tobi Kadachi. In Japanese, the name is Tobi Kagachi, so very similar but a little bit different. Its nickname is the Hirairyu, which means the Flying Thunder Wyvern. I was interested to see that this thing would be classified as a Fanged Wyvern because when we all saw it, we kind of thought that it looked really similar to Dalamadur, so we were kind of curious if it was a serpent or not. Which is funny because in its fun fact here, Kagashi, which is where they got the Kadachi from, is an ancient Japanese term for a snake. Tobi means to fly, so it is literally the flying serpent or flying snake. Keep in your mind the color looking very similar to Dalamadur as we go into its subspecies, which was introduced in Iceborne, which is the Viper Tobi Kadachi, or in Japanese, the Tobi Kagachi Ashu. In Japanese, its nickname is Hidokuryu, which is a flying venom wyvern, and my fun fact here is that it also shares the same coloring sort of convention as that of Dalamadur, so there's definitely some serpentine things going on here. Also from World Iceborne, and I know a lot of you are going to complain with how I pronounce this thing, but Odogaron, I guess it's Odogaron, Odogaron, I don't know, you tell me. In Japanese it's Odogaron, and its nickname is Zansoryu, which means the Misery Claw Wyvern. I mean, just look at those claws. Fun fact for this one is that Garon is kind of like Capcom's way of saying wolf. They use it in a bunch of different names for different things. There's even some frontier monsters which have no relation whatsoever, even in appearance, to Odogaron, but they end in Garon and they are wolves. But yeah, I'm not familiar that much with Darkstalkers, but apparently there's a character called John Talbane, and in Japanese the name is Garon. This monster also got a subspecies in Iceborne called the Ebony Odogaron, in Japanese Odogaron Ashu, and its nickname here, which is pretty cool sounding, it's Kyosoryu, which is the ominous or evil claw wyvern. There is a talk that's on YouTube, which you can look from the San Diego Comic-Con 2019, which they had a really interesting panel where they were discussing a bunch of stuff about the development of the game. And they were talking about how this monster is unique in that they tried doing all of these different colorings because they knew they wanted it to have dragon element. And they were trying to apply different things to the monster itself and really weren't getting it to work. And they had like a gold color and stuff like that. So they actually stopped, went to the armor design, applied the coloring and figured out how to make that work first, and then used that sort of color design language and applied it to the monster. So very backwards from how they usually do it. In Sunbreak, we got yet another Fanged Wyvern, which is Lunagaron, or Lunagaron, or however you want to pronounce it. In Japanese, it's Lunagaron, and its nickname is Hyodoryu, which is the Ice Wolf Wyvern. Of course, Sunbreak, all the main monsters are designed off of Western monsters, where, Rise was more about Japanese yokai, and this one takes the motif from, of course, the werewolf. And this picture here was just too cute not to share, but this is from the Capcom's Twitter account. They had some illustrations of sort of like the parenting of a child and a mother for the Lunagaron, and they had a picture of it, and it's so cute. Okay, last but certainly not least of the Fanged Wyverns is Magnamalo, the flagship monster of Monster Hunter Rise. Japanese, his name is Magai Magado, and his nickname is Onkoryu, which is the angry or furious tiger wyvern. Its motif here is that of a dead fallen samurai, with sort of like the onibi or the will-o'-the-wisps around the body. This is an imagery that is just very common here. It's not necessarily a yokai per se, but sort of like the fallen samurai cursed and brought back to life like a zombie, and filled with anger because having died on the battlefield. And much like the Ruiner Nergigante was in Iceborne, I'm a little disappointed that probably a lot of you never got this far to fight it, but if you hit Master Rank 100, you can then fight a new variant of the scene in Sunbreak called the Scorned Magnamalo. The nickname is quite a mouthful. It's Ensadoyomeku. I know I have really bad enunciation on that one, but this means the resounding grudge, Magnamalo. And fun thing here is the idea here is Ashura, which I know is a figure in Buddhism, but in Japan, like you'll notice like Gundam and all these other series, whenever they do like Ashura variants, they like to do this type of like spiky multi-armor type of thing. I'm not super well versed in the reasons why. I think maybe it just goes down to historic reasons of how Ashura was depicted in sort of like in a samurai context. Actually, you know what? I think I'll also just explain what the Japanese here is because that nickname is so weird. But Ensa, En means to be angry or furious. Sa means to cry out, like in grief or pain or suffering or anger. And Doyomeku is kind of a not oftenly used word, but it's sort of, you might notice that first kanji from Hibiku, which means it's a sound that when it sounds off, it sort of echoes in the distance and it just kind of resounds. So this is just like a cry of anger that just echoes and resonates around the area. So yeah, a lot of these variants have very cool Japanese nicknames, but on the flip side, the subspecies are boring as heck, so you win some, you lose some. And I thought it would be fun to end the video with the Carapaceons, or the crabs. In Japanese, these are Kokakushu. The first one is the Daimyo Hermitor. In Japanese, it's Daimyo Zazami. And its nickname here is Tategani, which means the shield crab, quite literally. And as its shield, or as its shell, it uses the skull of a monoblos. This is one of the features of all the crabs, which I'll be focusing on, and I think is super cool and helps really show the power and the environment in which these monsters reside. It does have a subspecies called the Plum Daimyo Hermitor because it's purple. In Japanese, just Daimyo Zazami Ashu, and its nickname is Shitategami, which means the purple shield crab. Super easy progression here, where the normal Daimyo Hermitor had the sort of skull of a monoblos, this one has the skull of a diablos on its rear. And we're going to jump ahead here because it's the same monster, but in Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate, we had a deviant called the Stone Fist Hermitor. The flavor sort of title for this one is Hokokudaki Daimyo Zazami. Hokokudaki means spear crushing or spear crusher Hermitor. And as I mentioned in a previous video, this is my favorite deviant armor in Monster Hunter and one of my favorite armor sets of the entire series. I have a video on it, but like the male one takes like a football player, which I'm not a fan of. The female armor is that of a cheerleader, which I love. And it just acts as sort of like an even better version of Mizutsune armor, where it gives you bubble dance. So the more you evade, the more attack power you get, and it's just a really fun set. I actually have a video on that if you want to look it up. I do have to think that the nickname here, from a Japanese language perspective, is intentional, so I think I'll explain it. Just in the fact that the regular Daimyo Hermitor has the shield, and this one has spear in it, is funny because the Japanese word for a contradiction is mujun, mu being one of the readings for that kanji for spear, and jun being another reading of shield. The idea, and I think this comes from like a Chinese story about, guy in marketplace selling over here on one side, a shield that can't be pierced by anything, and then on, later the day selling a spear that can pierce anything, and then someone calling him out and saying, what gives? You can't have both. Anyways, just interested in case you're probably wondering why they chose the word spear here. I mean, it certainly works. It makes sense because he's got a huge shield for an arm, but there is that little backstory that goes with it. Now, where the Daimyo Hermitor was the more defensive crab, we've got an offensive one here called the Shogun Senator. And this one in Japanese is Shogun Gizami. And the nickname here is Kamagani, Kama being the sickle or scythe, like a reaper. So it's the sickle crab. Fun fact for this one is that they actually confirmed that this was inspired from the design of the bugs in Starship Troopers. It also does have a Gravios shell on its back. In second generation, it did have a subspecies called the Terra Shogun Senator, it's a mouthful, called the Shogun Gizami Ashu. The nickname, unfortunately, is the same. They never gave it a different nickname from the regular variation. And the fun fact for this one, just like the Hermitor goes from a Monoblos to Diablos, from a Gravios shell, this one has a black Gravios shell. And in Generations Ultimate, it did get a deviant called the Rust Razor Senator. Its flavor text for its name is Yoroizaki, which means the Armor Shredder Senator, which you can certainly see in its design here. It's got the shell of a Glavenus on its rear, and even in battle, just like the Glavenus will do it with its own tail, it'll take its razor-like claw and then sort of sharpen it with the back end skull and then use that to cleave the hunter. It is super cool. And the final crab is a huge one, and this is Shengaoren. Its Japanese name is Shengaoren. 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 Man, intonation is tough on these things. But it's my natural inclination to try to go up or down in the middle of a word, which you shouldn't do. So, forever the gaijin. And the nickname is Toride Gani. Toride Gani. Toride is the name for fortress, because that's where you fight it, in the same arena that you fight the Lao Sha Long. So this is the fortress crab, and this thing's huge. It's like 20 to 30 meters tall, which is like 65 to 95 feet. So much bigger than the hunter, which I have a little image of here. And the cool thing about this one is where all the different crabs get like, progressively bigger skulls of more stronger wyverns. This one is carrying around the skull of a La Shanlong, which I think is just awesome. As I mentioned before, we're covering only flying wyverns in this video, which is a huge group. And in Japanese, it's called Hiryushu, or flying wyvern variety. Pretty much as is. Now the best place to start, of course, is the start, which is the very first monster they ever developed for the series Monster Hunter, which is the Rathian. Her name in Japanese is Diodea, and the nickname is Mesukaryu. You'll notice that Karyu is used later to denote Rathalos, or the fire dragon, and this is the female counterpart to Rathalos. Fun fact for her is on top of the original Monster Hunter logo and the series logo is a Rathian. That's not a Rathalos, that's Rathian. She is the very first monster created, and from her all the greatness derived, so pay your respects. Quite early in the series when they first introduced subspecies, Rathian was of course one of the first to get one, which is the pink Rathian. As I've explained in other videos, in Japanese for subspecies they just use the appending word ashu, which means the alternative or subspecies, so the name would be Diodea ashu. And the nickname for this one is a nice one, which is Okaryu. O being a special reading for Sakura, which is cherry blossom. So this is the cherry blossom fire dragon, which in English just became simply Pink Rathian. Fun fact for her, and I guess this is kind of obvious in hindsight, but I just never really thought about it, is that the subspecies for Rathalos includes both the Pink Rathian and also the male version, which is the Azure Rathalos, which we'll get to very soon. Rathian, of course, is also one of the few monsters that has a rare species, which is the Gold Rathian. In Japanese, the word for rare species is Kishoshu, so it's just Ryodea Kishoshu, and the nickname they use is Kin Karyu. Kin, of course, meaning gold, and Karyu for fire dragon. Fun fact for her is that she has a nickname called the Golden Moon, which is a nickname given to her for her gleam that shines in the light of the moon. In Monster Hunter Generations and All Generations Ultimate, she also got a deviant, which is a variant called the Dread Queen Rathian. In Japanese, they append very cool sounding nicknames to these deviants, and for this one it's Shidoku Hime. So it's Shidoku Hime Ryodea, and Shidoku Hime means the Purple Poison Queen. And when they say Poison Queen, they're not joking. She actually has 3 different tiers of poison that she can inflict. We've got the regular poison, deadly poison, and then the most fatal poison is the deadly or fatal poison. Yeah. If you want to see how it is to have your health zapped away, go fight this monster. And now, of course, we get to the series flagship monster, which is Rathalos, which is just the male version of the same fire dragon. In Japanese, his name is Ryodeusu, and the nickname for this is Karyu, just simply fire dragon. Fun fact for Rathalos, and I'm sure there's a lot of them, is that he is, alongside Kelby of course, one of the monsters that has appeared in every single mainline Monster Hunter game, and probably every spin-off as well, so calling him the series flagship is probably accurate. He does have a subspecies, which believe it or not is a flagship monster. This is a flagship for Monster Hunter G, called the Azure Rathalos, in Japanese just Diodeus Ashu, and the nickname for him is Sokaryu. Sol meaning azure, like azure in the color of blue. So this is the Azure Fire Dragon. Fun fact for this monster, but in the West, when they got Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, instead of having Brachydios on the cover, because it is the flagship monster for that game, for some reason they swapped them out, and they put Azure Rathalos on the cover instead. I don't know why they did that, but hey, the game sold a lot, so maybe it was the right move. And Rathalos also has a rare species called the Silver Rathalos, or Diodeus Kishoshu. And the nickname here is Ginkaryu. So Gin is silver, where Kin is gold. Very similar sounding, I know. So the Silver Fire Dragon. And this monster is kind of infamous. When a Rathalos likes to take to the sky and do sort of like a victory lap around the entire arena for a few times before swooping down, that in Japan is unaffectionately called the World Tour. And this monster has had lots of programming issues where he'll just do a world tour over and over and over and keep you waiting for several minutes on end. Rathalos, of course, also has a deviant, which is a special variant from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate called the Dread King Rathalos, or if you see my previous tweets about this monster, I always call it Spam Lord, because this thing does take to the sky quite a bit if you don't break its wings. And his nickname is pretty cool. It's Kokuen-o. Kokuen-o Diodeus, and Kokuen-o means Koku for black, and N-o, N meaning flame, and O meaning the king, so the Black Flame King. Fun fact for this one, and I'm sort of kicking myself for the fact that I didn't buy this rare merchandise, but in Japan, Kotobukiya, which is a licensed sort of retailer for Monster Hunter merchandise, sold a shirt around the release of this game that accidentally put the Darkness Road instead of the Lord. Because in Japanese it's Dodo, which is exactly the same for both phonetically. Unfortunately, 5 days later, Capcom did start saying that they were swapping them out for fixed versions. I kind of regret not buying the Road, because it's kind of funny. Moving on is Monoblos. In Japanese, the name is Monoborosu, and his nickname is Ikkakuryu, meaning the single-horned wyvern. Fun fact for this monster, but this is kind of like the original village boss of the original Monster Hunter game. And there's a whole lore and story about Kokoto Village and the Elder and how he spent like a billion years fighting a Monoblos. But one of the cool things that I've always loved about the series is that Monoblos has always remained a solo hunter-only quest, That's for historic and also just traditional reasons as well. Monoblos did get a subspecies called the white monoblos, in Japanese just Monoboros ashu, and its nickname just appends the word white, so Haku Ikkakuryu, which is the white single-horned wyvern. This is one of my favorite monsters to fight in the series, made a wonderful reappearance in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and even in Monster Hunter Stories too. I got to use this monster quite a bit. Fun fact for this monster is while Monoblos is always a solo-only hunt, the subspecies, the white Monoblos, was actually in the Chinese game Monster Hunter Online, and it was playable with multiplayer, so I'm really hoping that this sort of opens the door for a white Monoblos in the future that we can hunt with other players, because I want to see the monster return to the main series. So with the Monoblos, of course, comes the two-horned wyvern, which is Diablos, which in Japanese is Diaborosu, and his nickname is just Kakuryu, which means the horned wyvern. I debated putting him first and then doing Monoblos, but Monoblos is kind of like the OG, and going from, single to double made a lot of sense. Fun fact for this monster, while it does look like it'll bite your head off and eat it, and I'm sure Hollywood would do that if they had the chance, Diablos is actually a eater and enjoyer of cactus, which you'll see in the opening for Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. He does have a subspecies, which is the Black Diablos, or Diabolos ashu, and the nickname here is Kokkakuryu, which means the black horned wyvern. And a fun fact in this one that a lot of people know now, but this is technically not really a subspecies, this is a misclassification by the Hunters Guild. This is just a female Diablos during the mating season. It's when they're most irritable, there's lots of turf wars, and it's sort of a warning color sign. Their body turns black. Diablos was also blessed with a deviant, and this is technically a flagship monster, one of 6, for Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, which is the Bloodbath, or as I like to call the Monday Morning Diablos. In Japanese, it's got a really cool name, which is Oma Diaborosu. Oma is a very unusual name. Even in Japan, a lot of people were talking about it when they first saw it, because it's not a word that you would often see, which they like to do with the nicknames. But this would be something like the Massacre Demon. So Bloodbath is really quite an accurate translation. Fun fact for this monster, I guess, would be that this is my personal favorite monster in the entire series of Monster Hunter, including all the main games and the spin-off titles as well. It's also part of the inspiration behind my original character, which I used for Final Fantasy XIV, and I'll be using her going forward even in Monster Hunter games as well, which is Lily Bloodbath, the Bloodbath coming from this monster's name. Next up is everyone's favorite little rock who just likes to chill out in areas and disguise itself as a rock in the ground, which is Basarios. The Japanese name here is Basarumosu, and the nickname is just Ganryu, which means the rock wyvern. In case you haven't put one and one together, this is actually just an adolescent Gravios. They're quite different when they're little, young, timid monsters, aren't they? Basarios did get a subspecies called the Ruby Basarios, in Japanese just Basarumosu ashu, and the nickname here is the Toganryu, which means the Peach Rock Wyvern. Fun fact for this is from the localization blog for Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate from Andrew, who was leading the localization team at Capcom, was just how they came up with the localized name, because they go back and forth with the monster creators because they are part of the dev team who do the localization at Capcom. And they wanted to push for Ruby, but because it sounds really different in Japanese, it's Ruby, which is really cute sounding. They're like, well, it's not really like a cute, cuddly monster. And they're like, no, that's not what it sounds like in English, trust me. And after some persuasion, they managed to get them to okay it. It's just a really fun, interesting story of the differences between language and just sort of the impression that we get from certain words. And I'm really happy that the localization team at Capcom has the trust of all the directors and producers that they can discuss these scenes in full to make sure that they're coming up with names that are on point but still get across in the native language that they're aiming for. Okay, when a Basarios gets all grown, it becomes a more aggressive and mean Gravios. In Japanese, the name is Garabimosu, and the nickname here is Yoroiryu, which means the armored dragon. Fun fact for this, and if you watch my recently published video on the evolution of monsters in Monster Hunter, you'll see that while it does share a lot of very similar animations like its charging and its hip checks, with Diablos you'll notice that is for evolutionary reasons. They're not using the exact same skeleton, but they are distant relatives, and it helps explain why they fight kind of similar. Gravios also has a subspecies called the Black Gravios, or just Gravimos Ashu. In Japanese, they just append the word black again, so Kuro Yoroi Ryu, which means the Black Armored Wyvern. And fun fact is, just like Diablos and its subspecies, the Black Gravios is also technically a misclassification by the Hunters Guild, because the dark color comes from the chemical reaction of it pretty much bathing in molten lava at the volcanoes all the time, making it harder and just more aggressive. Next flying wyvern on the list is the Kezu, or in Japanese it's got the most adorable name, which is Furufuru. Its nickname, which was just recently given to it in Monster Hunter Rise after 17 years of not having a nickname, is Kikairyu, which is the strange or odd wyvern. Fun fact for this one is that because the composer is unknown, you can actually use its theme song, its background music for its fight, completely royalty free, which is awesome. I use it all the time. I'll play a little bit for you right now. Yeah, it's just great. Just so you guys know, Furufuru is quite a popular monster in Monster Hunter, and while some people find it very creepy and ugly, it also has a large list of incredibly adorable consumer goods, especially here in Japan. Kezu did also get a subspecies called the Red Kezu, or just Furufuru Ashu, and its nickname is Akakairyu, which is the red strange or red odd wyvern. Fun fact for this one, and I actually just accidentally gave it away in the original Kezu one, is that the Kezu for some reason never had a classification for its nickname, and they just recently gave it to it in Monster Hunter Rise. So Stories 2, which is the first game since its appearance in the last mainline game, included this red bad boy. It got a nickname there, and I highly recommend it. It's a really great monstie and a great ally, I'd say, throughout the mid to early end game. Continuing on with the strange and icky, we have Giganox, which in Japanese is Gigi Nebura, and its nickname is Dokukairyu, which is the poison odd wyvern. And for those of you who noticed the same nickname of Kairyu here for the strange or odd wyvern, it does share a common ancestor in the evolutionary chain with Kezu. It did also get a subspecies, which is the Baleful Giganox, which is Giginebura Ashu, its nickname being the Denkairyu, which is a thunder odd or thunder strange dragon. And a fun fact for this one, I guess, would be instead of birthing little babies, the little gigis, this thing likes to birth thunder sacks that go boom, so it's a bomb generating monster. Okay, moving on, we have another heavy hitter for this main series, which is Tigrex, or in Japanese, Tigarex. And his nickname is Goryu, which means the roar or roaring wyvern. A few fun facts for this one, but its name originates in Japanese from a tiger, because in Japanese, Diodeus or Rathalos is sort of using the name for a lion, for Leus. So they wanted this to be the tiger, so the tiger and lion, sort of like a really good juxtaposition of between, you know, the animal kingdom. So it was tiger and lion, so tiger and then Rex from sort of the Wyvern Rex that it evolves from, and also Tyrannosaurus Rex. And Capcom, I will never let them down for this, keeps changing and flip-flopping on its name. The community at large used to call this monster Tigrex for a great long time, until the localization team said, no, it should be from a T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex, so it's a Tigrex. We're like, Tigrex? So finally wrapped our head around it and started using that, only for them to go and change it yet again when they finally had it voiced in the games and they called it Tigrex. So Capcom, you're at fault for this. So if you're saying this Tigrex, Tigrex, or Tigrex, you're technically correct. It just depends on what time frame we're talking about. But I guess going forward officially it's Tigrex, but you know, it is what it is. Tigrex does have a subspecies called the Brute Tigrex, or in Japanese, Tigarex Ashu, and it just like a lot of the older monsters, just appends a black to the front of it, so it's Kokugoryu, which is the black roaring wyvern. And I feel kind of bad for the subspecies that it doesn't have more popularity, and I think it's because it was a Japan exclusive monster for way too long. The theme first popped up in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which is famously not localized into English. Then the subspecies was kind of off the roster for the 3rd generation of, you know, Tri and Tri-G. And then it finally made a reappearance back in Monster Hunter 4, but that game was also not released in the West. Until eventually the G release, and then Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, when the West finally got to see the Brute Tigrex. So I think this monster would be slightly more popular if it had a longer exposure period to fans in the West. And it's one of the rare monsters that has a rare species, which is the Molten Tigrex, or Tigrex Kishoshu. In Japanese, they just put the big Dai at the top of it, so Daigoryu, which means the large roar wyvern, which I'm a little disappointed in that name. It's kind of cheap. I definitely like Molten because of its explosive capabilities, but this is definitely one of my top 5 monsters of the series of all time. And the fun fact for this one is in Japan, a lot of its weapons or just the monster itself is affectionately nicknamed Kitty. Not because it's a cat, but because the name in Japanese for a rare species is Kishoshu. So taking the ki from that and then the t from the Tigrex, and it's Kitty. It's a really cute nickname that I love. The monster was also given a really cool deviant in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate called the Grimclaw Tigrex. Again, the deviants have really awesome Japanese nicknames or names that are appended. This one is Arakagizume. So Arakagizume Tigrex. Ara is the, not Ara, I know where you're thinking with that, but Ara comes from Arai, which means rough or coarse. Kagi here refers to a nail, like a rusted nail, and Zume or Tsume, which is claw. Yeah, so the rough or violent nail wyvern, I think Grimclaw captures that perfectly. Fun fact for this one is you'll notice that its jaw and its claws and its wings and even part of its tail are blue. This is actually from the veins that are just engorged with blood because it is highly developed compared to a regular Tigrex. So that's what sets these things apart and gives them that really cool color. Next up, proving that just because the skeleton of a monster might be the same, they can be very different in practice, is Nargacuga, or in Japanese, Narugakuruga. Its nickname is Jinryu, which means the swift wyvern. And this thing, although it uses the same skeleton as Tigrex, it fights so differently. And it's amazing when you consider its fun fact. There was only a 1-month gap between the release of the previous game to the G release, so when they had to make Nargacuga, they only had 4 months for the modeling phase. In fact, when they made the teaser trailer for the game, and they only had the red eyes of Narga going through the forest, they hadn't even completed the model yet at that point. So I think Nargacuga is a great example of how restrictions, both on time and also technical restraints, can really lead to some great creative things. I'm not sure the same can be said about its subspecies though, because it's widely forgettable, which is the green Nargacuga, or Narugakuruga Ashu. Its nickname is Ryokujinryu, which means the green swift wyvern. I guess the fun fact for this one is that its stingers don't knock you back, they actually KO and stun you. But this monster, you know, like, it's supposed to be more camouflage, like green in the forest. Before the target camera was implemented, it was definitely harder to track because it jumps around really fast. But yeah, there's really not much more to say about this one. But definitely, its rare species is worth talking about because it's awesome. The Lucent Nargacuga, or in Japanese, Narugakuruga Kishoshu. And this is the one that turns invisible during the hunt and on and off. Its nickname is Getsujinryu, which means the moon swift wyvern. And I guess in the same vein, this is where my fun fact comes from. The Lucent Nargacuga is often in Japanese referred to as Lunaruga. Luna being Luna for the moon, and then Naruga from Naruga. I love it. Lunaruga is a wonderful nickname, and I've almost always seen the monster referred this way. Being one of the more popular flagship monsters, it also got a deviant in Generations Ultimate called the Silver Wind Nargacuga. The cool Japanese name for this one is Shiro Hayate Narugakuruga, and Shiro Hayate means the white gale. Shiro being white, and then Hayate being a very fast gale or gust of wind. And I actually struggled to find a fun fact for this monster. Even though it's very fun and the armor and the weapons are very cool, it is pretty much, you know, as the name suggests. So Silver Wind is nicknamed after its ability to create really fast gusts or gales of wind that very anime style will cut through stuff and hurt you. Next up is the saber-toothed kitty, Berioth, or in Japanese, Beriorosu. Its Japanese is Hyogaryu for the nickname, which is the Ice Fanged Wyvern. And the fun fact for this one is that it's really kind of a good oppositional monster to Nargacuga. Nargacuga is often referred to as like the Black Shadow or Black Assassin, and you know, likes to fight camouflaged, where the Berioth is really in your face, hip checking you and pouncing at you. And even its theme song is nicknamed the White Knight. So I just find it very interesting how these two have nicknames that are, you know, opposite of one another. Unfortunately, this monster also suffers for having a largely forgettable subspecies, but one that fought very differently, called the Sand Berioth. In Japanese, just Birioros Ashu, and the nickname was Fugaru, which means the Wind-Fanged Wyvern. I did struggle to come up with a fun fact for this one because it hasn't appeared much in Monster Hunter at all, but it is named this way because of its ability to sort of generate sand tornadoes in the sandy plains. Whether we'll ever see this subspecies again, I don't know. But let me know down in the comments if you have any fun facts for this one. I was really struggling. Berioth is one of those special monsters that has a variant, which is called Frost-Fanged Berioth. The Japanese name here is a little hard. It's a Hyojin Haku Beriorosu. Hyojin is like the ice blade, and Haku, it doesn't mean to wear, but it's sort of like, you know, how a samurai or a knight has their sword attached like to their hip. That's what it kind of means, like it's equipped with or has. Fun fact for this monster is, although if you've played Monster Hunter Stories, one of the main characters, Avinia, she has a Berioth who she nicknames Frostfang, which is funny because that's what they end up calling the variant, but these are two very different monsters. So hers is just a normal Berioth, where this variant came much later, so don't get them confused. And I guess as another fun fact is that this monster is perfect for getting weapons with really high element of ice. So to me, it was kind of like the savior monster for people who are struggling with Alatreon. Now this next one, I debated putting a Cantor and the next monster at the very end of the list because I feel that they are the biggest, most, you know, strong and impressionable flying wyverns. It's just, they appear earlier in the series, so it doesn't make sense to put them at the end with all the more recent monsters. But a lot of people feel they got cheap shot here, that they were not classified as elder dragons because they don't fly. But we have a Cantor, which is Akamutorumu, which has a really cool nickname of Haryu, which just means the supremacy or the supreme wyvern, and this thing definitely dominates. Fun fact for this one is that in Japan it's nicknamed the ATM, which is an abbreviation of Akamutorumu ATM. And it is the bank of a Cantor because usually when it appears in games, its parts are huge and they sell for like massive amounts of zenny, like 20-30,000 zenny each if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's a great place to make some money, is just farming this monster. Now, where lore-wise the Acantor was like this legendary monster which was nicknamed the Black God, we also have got the White God, which is its ice counterpart, which is Ukanlos. I always have a hard time pronouncing the Japanese name here. It's Ukamurubasu, and its nickname is Horyu, which means the collapse or avalanche wyvern. And fun but not so fun fact is, you know, just like a Cantor, if you look at the ecology video or the evolution video that I did, you'll see that they are classified as flying wyverns for evolutionary reasons only. We're talking way back when the flying wyverns were there. They split off to some other evolutionary paths, so they don't have wings, they don't fly. So yeah, I think they should have been called elder dragons, but I guess they weren't. I don't know why. Maybe they felt that elder dragons at that point early in the franchise was still a very precious term they didn't want to use, or maybe they thought, you know, going into the evolution would be cool, but you know, they very much fight like and act like elder dragons in just how grandiose they are, so you know, I petition that we get them reclassified. Okay, moving on to one of the flagships of Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate is Astalos, Japanese name of Daizeksu. Its nickname here is Dendyu, which just means the electric dragon. And this aggressive bad boy, the fun fact for him is that the name in Japanese, Daizex, is a combination of Dai from like Raiden for like electricity, and then the German pronunciation for insect, which is Insekt. So they have Insekt, Daizeksu. So yeah, it's the electrical insect, and very much so. I love when you're fighting this thing. It makes these really like cricket types of sounds when you knock it over and it's flapping of its wings. It's very much designed as a bug. And it does have a really cool deviant, which is the Bolt Reaver Astalos. In Japanese, the name here is Seidenshu. Seidenshu Daizeksu, which means the blue electric Astalos, or the owner or lord of the blue thunder or lightning. Fun fact here is that, Jedi Master Astalos, as I like to call him, is the highest ranked in popularity of all the deviants, even higher than, Bloodbath Diablos, which is blasphemy, but, that's what the global fans chose. So it ranked 26 out of all the monsters in the 20th anniversary poll. So yeah, very popular, and I would not be surprised if they ever do find a way to bring back the deviants, that this is one of them that they'll bring back. Next up is the flagship monster of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, which is Seregios, or in Japanese, Seruregios. Its nickname is Seijinryu, which is the Thousand Blades Wyvern, because it does shoot out lots of its, I guess we like to nickname it the Pinecone Wyvern. Very cool monster though. And you will often hear this monster referred to as Steve. And where that comes from is there was, sort of the weekly Capcom community hunting streams, and they were playing Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and Yuri, who was the community manager for Monster Hunter in the West, he was in a tough spot. He couldn't really talk too much about Monster Hunter 4G, which just had a trailer because it was pre-E3, so they hadn't announced it officially for the West, and so he just kept getting bombarded with questions. And before the stream, he was asked, hey, are you going to talk about the name of the new flagship monster? And he says, for now, how about Steve? And just to show how tight this community has been, we love and still love our community managers for each of the regions, and we interact a lot. It really took on, and now everyone just calls Seregios Steve, and that's where it comes from. It's a bird! It's a Bay-52 bomber plane! No! It's Basilgeuse, or Basilgeuse, or however it's going to be pronounced when they finally do it. Or maybe they already pronounced it and I just missed it, so let me know. But the name here is Basilgeuse. In Japanese, I always call it Geusu, but this is Gyusu, Basilgeuse. And its nickname is Bakudinryu, which is the Exploding Scale Wyvern. Fun fact, actually, there's so many fun facts about its theme song that I'm just going to point you guys again to Davi Vask. He's got a wonderful video sort of breaking down from a musical composer standpoint all the different techniques that they're using in the theme song to really capture the personality of this monster, which he called the attention-seeking bastard, which I love. Unfortunately, like art and music, like these are all parts of like the franchise that I really wish the more mainstream players would latch onto, because I find it fascinating. So yeah, any opportunity I have to call out these wonderful creators and cool videos, I'm going to do. So go check out his video and let me know in the comments that you were sent here by Gaijin. He got an awesome variant called the Seething Basilgeuse. This is Guren Tagiru Basilgeuse. Guren Tagiru, Guren means like red or crimson, and Tagiru means to be like seething or boiling with rage. So yeah, I think the English name is short, sweet, but nails it perfect. A fun fact for this one, and I don't know why, but when I go to YouTube and I look at the Capcom's official stream where they were announcing sort of like all these stats, for some reason it seems like they edited their video to remove a lot of the stats. I don't know why. But if you go onto like the mirror streams from the Japanese creators, you can still see the original video, and it was listed as the third most hunted monster in all of Sunbreak, just behind Lunagaron and Daimyo Hermitor. That was probably just because people like to farm this monster for its high threat ranking for the anomaly points. But yeah, I don't know why they removed that fun fact, but yeah, fun monster, high threat level, and juicy hitboxes means popular monster to hunt. Next up is the flagship boy of Monster Hunter Frontier, which is Espinas, or in Japanese just Espinasu, and its nickname is Ibararyu, which means the Thorn Wyvern. Some of you might not know why it's such a big deal that this monster in Sunbreak was such a big deal, but this thing has been the face and the flagship monster of Monster Hunter Frontier since Season 2. That's like 2008. So this is a very old monster, which is very iconic to the spin-off series, which is Monster Hunter Frontier, which was an online service game. So having this thing appear in the mainline series games was a great change, and I hope that, it's a sign of things to come, because there's a lot of really cool monsters in Frontier. One of which, no less, is its subspecies, which is the Flaming Espinas. In Japanese, just Espinas Ashu. Its nickname here, I believe, is Kyokusaryu, which means the light brown thorn wyvern. A lot of fans just nicknamed this the Brown Espinas for a long time. So the name Flaming I thought was a really welcome addition and helps capture some of its aspects. And if it wasn't obvious with the collaboration in Monster Hunter World with Behemoth from Final Fantasy between Yoshi P and Tsuji P, the two producers, they are friends, and of course Capcom loves Final Fantasy, so this monster has an attack called the Mega Flare, and that is a direct call out and paying homage to Square Enix monster Bahamut. I really hope that they bring back the rare species, because that's another really cool colored variant of this monster that I see no reason why they can't. Okay, going from monster I love to monster I don't love, we have Legiana, or in Japanese, Legiana. The nickname here is Fujyoryu, which means the Wind Drift Wyvern. I guess semi-fun fact is that this, you can tell from the render here, but it shares a very similar skeleton to Rathalos, which is interesting. But the fun fact that I will give this monster is that Odogaron likes to kill and hunt these things and drag it down to its lair in the Rotten Vale, and if you do come across one of its corpses down there, you can actually carve it for a free material. So thank you, Doggy Boy Odogaron, for the free mats. And I don't know if we did something wrong and we had bad karma coming to bite us in the butt, but we got the most annoying monster in my opinion, which is the Shrieking Legiana, which is a variant of the monster in Iceborne. The nickname here being Itesasu Legiana. That would be something roughly like the Piercing Freeze Legiana. And the fun fact for this monster, I also struggled with quite a bit, so let me know if you guys have a fun fact for this one. So the only one I'll give you here is that, you know, where sometimes variants or subspecies might, you know, act very differently from the regular normal ones, these seem to have quite a good relationship with the normal Legiana, because, you know, in battle they'll do their really high-pitched call and they'll call in normal Legianas to fight alongside it. So I don't know, maybe they're seen as pack leaders, maybe they're seen as like alphas or something, but yay, nothing's more fun than 2 or 3 Legianas at once, right? But one of my favorite ones from that generation is Paolumu, or Paurumu is the Japanese name, and its nickname is Fukuryu, which means the floating wyvern. This thing is adorable. It's like a mix between like a bat and a rat. Interesting thing here is you see like the wings look very similar to that of a Puke Puke, but they're not related in any way whatsoever. Honestly, the best fun fact for this one is go play Monster Hunter World and watch it get in a turf war with Odogaron, and it just plays with it like a dog with a chewy toy. It is hilarious to see him just, you know, dragging him around and jumping around with him. I feel bad for the monster, but it's also cute as all get out. This cutie pie also got a subspecies in Iceborne called the Nightshade Paolumu, or in Japanese just Paurumu Ashu, and its nickname is Fumindyu, which is the floating sleeping wyvern. It's got a very cute ecology video, so I encourage you to go and look it up on YouTube and watch it if you haven't seen it already. The fun fact for this one is probably its English name. I'm going to assume that Nightshade is taken from belladonna, which is a toxinous plant. And considering that the scene has a gas that puts people to sleep and is a toxin, I imagine that's where the name came from. And our very last flying wyvern is Reidao. Reidao is the Japanese name for it, and the nickname of Kodairyu, which is the bright thunder dragon. This render gives me no joy though, because it's so horizontally long, it's very hard to fit on a page. So yeah, creator problems here. And we really don't know much about the monster. We were able to fight it in the demo for like the open beta for Monster Hunter Wilds, and it was fun. But I guess the fun fact I'll give it, I believe it was Heijay and Rurikon were doing a stream, and they referred to it as the Thor Magala, because when Rei has its horns pointed inward, it kind of resembles the silhouette of a Gormagala, and Thor obviously for the Lord of Thunder. But yeah, that's going to be my fun fact for Reidao. We don't know much about this monster other than it's the apex monster of the first area in the game, and we'll have to wait until 2025 to learn more about it. Okay, now let's jump in. Part 5, which is the Elder Dragons, or in Japanese, Koryushu, which means the Old Dragon variety. In fact, we're going to start with a fun fact, which is, if you've noticed throughout this series, whenever we refer to wyvern, we're using the kanji for dragon, which is a ryu. But there's also a less simplified, more original way to write this kanji, which is still used today, which is the first one you're seeing here, which is also ryu. The way that Monster Hunter does it is they use the less simplistic one for dragon, like the Elder Dragons, and everything else in the game is the more simplified one, which they use and call Wyvern. It's just a sort of terminology thing that they do in Monster Hunter, but it's always interesting to see nonetheless. Of course, we have to start with the big boy himself, which is Fatalis. In Japanese, his name is Kokuryu Miraboreyasu, and his nickname is just Kokuryu, which means the Black Dragon. Fun fact for this one is when they were asking the composer to make the song for the final boss, they didn't know yet what they wanted to do, so they just said it's going to be like a endgame stronger version of Rathalos. And that's why you hear the same theme of Rathalos in the theme song for Fatalis. It's just for those historical reasons. Fatalis is special that it has a bunch of variants. They're not subspecies or anything like that. I mean, this is the legendary Black Dragon of the series. The first variant, though, is called Crimson Fatalis, which has a nickname of Koryu, which means the Crimson Dragon. So you would just line it up and say Koryu Miraboreyasu, which is just Crimson Dragon, Crimson Fatalis. The fun fact for this one is that in Japan, most people call it Mirabarukan, or like Mira Vulcan, which is the nickname that's taken from its armor set and what that's called. It's just a better way of differentiating this one from the regular Fatalis. I do love Crimson, especially for its sort of asymmetric horns. It's got one that's more longer than the other. So yeah, I'm happy that it gets its own separate name. Now this next one gets an asterisk, is that this is not recognized in like the encyclopedias or anything, but across fans and just in the game in general, there is a special variant of the variant Crimson Fatalis, which is his glowing red-hot version which appeared in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Fans have called this the Mirarasu, or the Crimson Wrath Fatalis, and this is taken from the name of its armor set. And fun fact, again, this thing only exists in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate in G rank and is a must play. So if you do get your hands on a 3DS, make sure you check this one out because it does play different and is much cooler than the, well, much hotter than the regular Crimson Fatalis. And the next but not least is the old man himself, the White Fatalis, or Japanese Soryu Miraboreyasu, which means the Ancestor Dragon. The fun fact for this one is in Japan, we often refer to it as Mirarutsu, like the roots, the Ancestor Dragon, and this is also taken from the name of its armor set. In Japan, it's a little bit different in English. Sometimes the armor sets have a really cool nickname that doesn't exist inside the monster's name, and often that'll get used as well, and this is just one of those cases. Okay, we're not done with the Black Dragons yet, and I just want to do a quick aside here that when you hear the term Black Dragon, this is something that was like a legend in the Monster Hunter universe forever. Basically, they're the most rare, most, ancient, powerful dragons, and they're so rare and basically part of fables that no one really knows if they're all talking about the same monster or a different one. So for a long time, spottings of Alatreon they thought was just Fatalis. I mean, it certainly fits the bill when it comes to its appearance of being dark, being crazy strong dragons. So yeah, it's not necessarily part of the family of Fatalis, but it's considered a Black Dragon, which is a group of this and the next legendary one, which you're going to see. This one, of course, is called Alatreon, and in Japanese the name is Arabatorion, and the nickname is Kokuryu, which is the Blazing Black Dragon. The fun fact for this one, and this is probably less fun in English because it's just different the way that they translate it, but all the wyverns in the game, like a Rathalos, have a rare drop called a plate, like a Rathalos plate. In Japanese, that name for plate is actually called the reversed scale, and this comes from an old folklore idea that a dragon has one scale on its body, which has sort of like an ingrown nail, has grown backwards and is pointing the other way, and it hurts. So if you touch it, it becomes incredibly irritable and will probably just kill you. So the idea of the rare reversed scale is the rare item that you get from wyverns. So imagine all the hunters' surprise when their first carve off an Alatreon was one of these reversed scales or plates. You're like, oh my gosh, I got the rare item, and then you carve again and you get another one, and you carve again and you get another one. And then you quickly realize that this is a very special monster, and this Elder Dragon is covered in reversed scales or plates. So that's one of the cool things when you first fight the monster and you beat it. It catches me every time, and I think it's really cool. And the final monster as part of the Black Dragon family is Dire Moralis, or in Japanese, Guran Miraosu. Nickname for this one is Rengokuryu, which is the Molten Black Dragon, and this thing is as big as it looks. This was a huge monster that you fought both underwater and on land, and was included in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. The name here is really cool in Japanese, the nickname, the Rengokuryu. Rengoku is also the same wording or spelling as purgatory, so it sounds really badass. But they're using a slightly different, obviously, kanji for Goku. Instead of it being like hell, they're using black for the Black Dragon. So it's just really nice. The Molten Black Dragon, which sounds like it's coming out of something like the Bible. Okay, moving on to probably the first really large monster, sort of like a raid monster that players got to experience, which is Lao Shan Long. In Japanese, it's Lao Shan Long. And this is, the nickname is read the same way, Lao Shan Long, and it means the Old Mountain Dragon. I believe this is a Chinese pronunciation. It might have a little bit of a twist to it, obviously, because it's Japanese, the way that they're reading it. But it's just literally the word Old Mountain and Dragon strung together. Fun fact for this one, and I love this about Monster Hunter, is that it always tried to bake in a lore reason for all of its game mechanics. And for this one, it was the very first village, which is Kokoto. There was a legend around the Elder, which was a Wyverian, in which he was hunting a Lao Shan Long and decided to take his fiancée with him, and she became the 5th member of their hunting party. She tragically died in the hunt, and so it became kind of like an auspicious, like superstitious thing, like the number 5 is considered bad luck. So they decided, of course very conveniently for the game system requiring 4 not 5, that going forward that the guild would hunt in groups of 4 not 5 because of this tragic story. This thing actually got a subspecies called the Ashen Lao Shan Long, or in Japanese, as we've said in other videos, they just use the word Ashu to mean subspecies, so Lao Shan Long Ashu. And the nickname for this one's a really interesting way to read it. It's Yen Shan Long, which means the Rocky or Rock Mountain Dragon. Fun fact for this one is that it's not actually a subspecies. This is a miscategorization by the guild. This is just a Lao Shan Long that got too close to the rubble and is covered in, rocky dust. And it looks like a new species of monster, but it's not. Okay, now we're moving on to the 2nd generation, or they call them the Dos Elders, which is the 3 elder dragons that came sort of at the same time. We're going to start this one out with Kushala Daora. In Japanese, the name is Kusharu Daora, and its nickname is Koryu, which means the Steel Dragon. Obviously named that way because its skin and scales are tough like steel. Fun fact for this one is there's an ecology video. If you look it up on YouTube, lots of people have uploaded it in the older games, where you can see what it looks like after it sheds its skin. It actually is pure white for a moment, until then I think it oxidizes and becomes hard and metallic like in its sheen. So very cool. I would love to actually be able to see this in game one of these days, but they haven't done it yet. It's just an ecology video. Before a Kushala Daora does sort of gets its nice little sheen, it does start to go into like a molding, sort of like shedding phase, and this is when it gets really hard. If you own a lizard or reptile that shed, they get very irritable, and the same thing is for this dragon as well. So the rusted Kushala Daora, which in Japanese is Sabita Kushala Daora, which literally just means rusted Kushala Daora, has a nickname of Seikoryu, which is the rusted steel dragon. And this is just a Kushala Daora that is about to shed its skin, turn beautifully white, and then turn into a regular one. So rusted. And the fun fact, and actually not so fun fact, is that Capcom seems committed to this idea that it's just rusted and horrible. So all the weapons from the monster are just trash. Horrible affinity, horrible sharpness, all that kind of stuff. I get it, from a gameplay standpoint, from a story standpoint, but if you're going to make us fight a really hard monster, give us something usable, please. And in Sunbreak, it got another variant called the Risen Kushala Daora. In Japanese, the Risen series of Elder Dragons are called Kai Kokufuku, and then whatever the name of the monster is, that just means that it's an affliction-conquered monster. So this is the Kai Kokufuku Kusharu Daora. I'm not going to have much fun facts for these ones, except for they're just really cool, and you should certainly hunt them if you have Sunbreak. They are different and quite challenging. For this one, you will need to unlock Master Rank 120 in order to fight it. The second of the Dos Elder Dragons, the trio, is going to be Chameleos, or in Japanese, Onazuchi. Its nickname is Kasumiryu, which means the Mist Dragon, quite literally. And this sort of item stealing, awesome, chameleon is again one of the 3 second-gen elders alongside Kushara Daora and Teostra. One fun fact that I could include here is that a lot of people used to make jokes about, we'd have a trailer for a new Monster Hunter game and there was nothing being shown but trees, and people would be like, oh, there's a Chameleos in this shot, because of course, it can turn invisible and you wouldn't be able to see it anyways, and eventually we were right. I mean, did you catch it? The first few slides of this video had Chameleos in it. This theme did get a variant, which is the Risen Chameleos in Sunbreak, so Kai Kukufuku Onazuchi for the Affliction Conquered. And this was the first of the Risen Elder Dragons that you could fight, and you unlocked it at Master Rank 110. The next piece of the second generation Elder Dragon puzzle is of course Teostra. In Japanese, he's called Teo Teskatoru, and his nickname is Enoryu, which means the Flame Lord Dragon. And yes, he actually was the Flame Lord. Most of his weapons had the largest amount of flame element on them, until his 4th generation when they introduced the Blast element, which was first introduced in the 3rd one as Slime with Brachydios only, and then it sort of expanded. So when Teostra came back in Monster Hunter for Ultimate, it gained the Blast element, which I think fits it perfectly, and that's why you'll see Blast in a lot of its weapons right now. Teostra is also another one of the Afflicted Elder Dragons, so we have the Risen Teostra from Sunbreak. So once again, Kai Kukufuku Teo Teskatoru. And this theme unlocked at Master Rank 140. Next up, and this is quite rare because with Rathian and Rathalos we have a female and male, part of the same monster. We have the same thing with Teostra and the female counterpart, which is Lunastra. In Japanese, her name is Nana Teskatori, and her nickname is Enkiryu, which is the Flame Queen Dragon. I'm going to use this opportunity to be incredibly subjective and just call her the Queen of Flaming Trash. I can't stand this monster in Iceborne. I really hated her and the fire that just zaps your health, but you know what? It's my opinion. Maybe you like the monster a lot. But this is the female counterpart to Teostra. Also in 2nd generation, we had a really unique Elder Dragon called Yamatsukami. In Japanese, its name is identical, just without the space, so it's Yamatsukami. And its nickname is Fugakuryu, which is the floating peak or floating mound or mountain dragon. There's lots of videos online that you can do and watch of this fight, but it's incredibly unique, especially how it was in DOS versus like the later games. But this monster has not appeared in a very long time in the main series. If it was named today, I think you would probably call it Yamatsu instead of Yamatsukami, and I'll explain it now in the next monster. Because it shares the same idea of the Japanese name, I'm jumping to the 3rd generation just for this monster to show you Amatsu. In Japanese, its name is Amatsu Magatsuchi, and its nickname is Randyu, which is the Storm Dragon. If you happen to watch the Amatsu Magatsuchi monster feature video on my channel, you might know this already, but its name basically translates directly to the god of heavenly calamity. Now, it's a long subject that I'm not an expert in and I don't want to get into a long tangent on, but old Japanese names of gods would often use this kanji for tsu, which is just sort of like it just means like of. It's just part of a name. It's just a long name. So when you have the Amatsu, the tsu in there is the same as Yamatsu Kami. So it's the same idea, so I thought I would include them one by each other, and that's why I think that Yamatsukami would be more Yamatsu if they were going to translate it in modern day. Okay, going back, I probably should have introduced the scene probably first in the video, but it's a dumb horse, so why not? I just throw it wherever I want, and that is Kirin. Kirin in Japanese is Kirin, and its nickname, which it actually just got recently, is Genju, which means mythical beast. How appropriate. Like Kezu, for some reason this monster went a very long time in the series without having an official nickname in the game in Japanese, so it was kind of special when they added it. The fun fact for this one, of course, is that the Kirin horn is a Rajan's favorite performance-enhancing treat. You can see this in Iceborne when the Furious Rajang has an ecology video in which it rips the horn off of a Kirin and chomps on it, which is supercharging its, its thunder ability, which I thought was cool. It's something that they've always hinted at, but they never showed it explicitly until Iceborne came out, and that was just a really cool moment. This annoying dumb horse, which likes to run around, also has a subspecies called the Oroshi Kirin, in Japanese just Kirin Ashu, and its nickname is Kyogenju, which would mean something like the ethereal mythical beast. Fun fact for this one is that it never actually got a nickname in the official games yet, but they are using it officially, so they just added this nickname in the encyclopedia, which came out here just this summer for the 20th anniversary. And I think they did a reprint of its creator's model, and they're using the nickname there as well. So it joins like Kezu and Red Kezu as monsters that recently got nicknames. But yeah, if you want to talk about how geeky the localization team at Capcom can be, when they came up with the name for this one, they went for Oroshi, which is not Oroshi like, minced radish. But it's a really old Japanese word, which means like the cold wind coming down from the mountain. It's so Japanese that they actually have a kanji, which is called a kokuji, which is a kanji that was not originated from China but was created in Japan. And it's got like the character for down, and then it's below it is the character for wind. So yeah, when they said they really want a very, Kirin is a very Asian based mythical creature, they wanted a more Asian sounding name. When they came back with Oroshi Kirin and they told them what those come from, they approved it. And I just think that's the geekiest thing ever. Like, that's more Japanese than I could pull out of my hat. So hats off to the team for coming up with something so unique. Okay, moving on to the third generation, we have the awesome Seideus? I don't know, correct me down below on how you actually pronounce this. I've always had trouble with it. In Japanese, the name is Nabaru Deusu, and its nickname is Daikairyu, which means the Great Sea Dragon. The fun fact for this monster, and this is probably not a well-known fact because it was from a very obscure magazine interview in 2016, but Nakarkos, who we'll be covering later in this video, feeds on the little babies of this monster, this elder dragon. It joins Nergigante as one of the few that eats other elder dragons. Now, if they weren't babies like hatchlings, there's no way that Nakarkos could eat these things because they get so big and strong. So it's just, I think they're occupying the same sea region, and that's why. I even covered that in my map video, which you can find on my channel as well. But yeah, that's official lore that they shared outside the game, so happy dreams envisioning that. This monster actually did get a subspecies, which is called the Goldbeard Seideus. Japanese name is Nabaru Deus Ashu, and nickname is Kokairyu, which means the Emperor Sea Dragon. Fun fact for this monster, if you don't use bowguns, the level 3 normal shot has a special effect to it, where if you hit it in between, let's say like the arm and the torso of a monster, it's larger, it can ricochet and get additional hits of damage off. This monster is so big, and its beard is so big as well, that you could just pelt off normal shot level 3s and it would ricochet multiple times across its face and body, and you can kill this monster in record time. So this was probably the most fun monster to use bowguns on, just for that fact alone. Moving on, we have the awesome, huge spectacle hunt, which is Gen Moran. In Japanese, the name is Gen Moran, and its nickname is Hozanryu, which means the peak mountain or mountain peak dragon. And this thing definitely is as big as a peak of a mountain. It's got different phases and everything. You fight it on a ship. It's cool, and I hope they bring it back. The fun fact, and this is kind of a sad fact, but you know how like in anime or movies they show people like shedding tears of anger or frustration? I actually had that once in my life, which was when I was playing Monster Hunter 3G. This was my first Monster Hunter. I was desperately hooked. I was a Lance main, and it was on the 3DS, and nobody in my workplace was playing the game because I had, gotten into it at a point where I guess people around me weren't playing it. So there was no online. It wasn't on Wii U yet, so I had no choice but to fight this thing solo. Now, G rank back then did not scale, so you had to take down a monster that had the health of assuming 4 hunters as a solo hunter. This was made even harder because in this fight, if it destroys the ship, you fail the mission, and you have to take all 45-50 minutes to either kill or repel the monster without letting the ship be killed. This was incredibly hard to do solo, and it took me almost, I want to say like a week and a half of constantly trying to win, getting to like the last 1 or 2 minutes only to find the ship gets destroyed and I failed the quest. I didn't give up though. I kept at it, and I discovered that the inside of its mouth is a 90% hit zone. It's really squishy, and you only get a few opportunities to get in there to do some attacks. But by making sure that I was able to get inside of its mouth and get some hits off, throw some large barrel bombs in there, that allowed me to go over the damage threshold and finally defeat this monster so I can continue on my first G rank journey as a solo hunter new to the franchise. So yeah, quite an experience trying to take this thing down solo in G rank as a solo hunter. I don't think I'll try that ever again. This thing actually got a subspecies as well called the Hollowed Gen Moran, or just Gen Moran Ashu. Its nickname here is Dezandu, which means the ghost or phantom mountain dragon. And the hallowed here is like, like sacred, like the hallowed land, because it's got that like special hue to it. But in Capcom's localization blog, which I really hope they bring back because I've always found these really fascinating, they talked about how the team was really pushing for a name like Elysian Gen Moran, obviously from Elysium, right? The place you go when you die and stuff like that. And I think that is the coolest name. But they were denied the name powers to be the director. They decided, no, that doesn't work. We want Hollowed, even though that was a long name, and they ended up having to abbreviate it to like H dot in item names because it was too long. But it's just a kind of reminder that, the Loke team wins some, they lose some, but I think throughout the years they've been able to win a lot more, and I love some of their names for the subspecies. So yeah, Capcom, if you're listening, you done goofed. In the 3rd generation, you should have listened to your Loke team. This was a cool name. In 4th generation, we got another very similar type monster, which was Daren Moran. In Japanese, it's Daren Moran, and the nickname is Gozandu, which is the large or great mountain dragon. The fun fact for this one is something I'll never forget, which was like 1 week away from the release of Monster Hunter 4 here in Japan. They were doing a live stream where they were showing off the game and doing some hunts, and they were showing off the Gathering Hall. And inside of it, they were showing off the chat system, which you can use with the touchscreen of the Nintendo 3DS. And so they were like showing that you can type up stuff, and they were like, well, what should we write? And they said, well, how about who? Like, who do you want to hunt or whatever? So that's Dare. And when they wrote Da and then they put De, in the autocomplete, it popped up Daren Moran. Like the name of the monster popped up in the autocomplete. They've never announced this monster. They weren't supposed to. And so the internet went ablaze once we saw this. They quickly tried to cover it up and like move on as if nothing happened. But it was like really obvious because Gen Moran is a very well-known name. So hearing Daren Moran, we're like, oh my god, we're getting a new Gen Moran. And of course that was the intro of the game, so it wasn't going to be a very big spoiler for very long. But I always thought that was hilarious that the autofill chat would be the reason why they accidentally leaked that monster's name. Okay, before you get out your pitchforks, yes, this is not technically an Elder Dragon, or is it? In the game, they've always classified Gore Magala, or Goa Magara, as unknown, or question. But in the evolutionary sort of charts of the monsters, you'll notice that they do categorize it alongside Shagaru, which is an Elder Dragon, and it's in the category of Elder Dragons. So in my eyes, it fits here both because, of its relationship with Shagaru Magara, which we're going to be getting to, and also just because, it eventually becomes it, right? So yes, it's not an Elder Dragon at this point in its life, which is also why you can use traps on it and stuff like that, but just bear with me and let's get through it. So the nickname for this one is Kokushokuryu, which is the Black Eclipse Wyvern. Very cool name. And yeah, not only was this thing our flagship for Monster Hunter 4 and first introduced to the West in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, but yeah, it's not technically an Elder Dragon, but it will grow into one, which leads us to our next monster. And that is Shagaru Magara, or in Japanese, Shagaru Magara, same name. Its nickname in Japanese is Tenkairyu, which is the Heavenly Cycle Dragon, because there's a sort of a story of a cycle of it coming and going and stuff like that. And this is affectionately nicknamed, I think, by the community as Shaggy. I definitely call it Shaggy quite a bit as well. And the fun fact for Shaggy, and this is kind of a crazy one, which is how they give birth. So Shagaru Magaras have they have like the germ cells inside the virus that they infect other monsters with. And when a monster gets infected then dies, you know, there's rare cases where the germ cells can then feed off of the flesh of that monster and become a baby. And every rare so often they become a Gore Magala. And the Gore Magala, when it gets of age, will either evolve into a Shagaru Magara, like through molding and shedding and stuff like that, or something tragic can happen, which we'll touch about in just a minute. This is another of the Elder Dragons in Sunbreak that got a variant, which is the Risen Shagaru Magara. In Japanese, here's a mouthful, it's Kai Kokufuku Shagaru Magara. And this thing didn't unlock until Master Rank 180, so my assumption is a lot of you, or a lot of people, never got the chance to hunt this monster, which is a shame, because it was a really fun fight. Okay, so story time, I'll try to keep this light, but a Gore Magala, right? It starts to get older, it molds, it's going to evolve and turn into the Shagaru Magara it's meant and destined to be. Problem is that the Shagaru Magara, there's only one in the Forbidden Land, and it does not like to share its territory. So inside the frenzy virus of the Shagaru, it's got cells that will attack monsters with the frenzy virus, like attack Gore Magala. So this is a Gore Magala who was nearby where a Shagaru Magara was, and instead of going through with the whole molding process, it's actually getting stopped in between. So it's halfway changed and halfway not, and it's being eaten alive by the virus which is inside of its body. It's so tragic. And that's why it's called the Chaotic Gore Magala. And this is technically a variant of Gore Magala, so not an Elder Dragon. This is the Elder Dragon that never was. The name of this variant in Japanese is Konton ni Umeku Gore Magara, which means the Gore Magala that screams out in chaos. And the nickname is the same as Gore Magala, so Kokushokuryu, which is the Black Eclipse Wyvern. So everything about this monster I think is super cool. Its name, Chaotic Gore Magala, is very close to the nickname of the variant in Japanese. Konton means chaos, Konton ni means in chaos, and Umeku means to scream out. So this is, it captures the feeling, right? And really it's got cool armor, cool weapons. One of the things that I really like is that the male armor set was the Chaotic series, and the female armor set was called the Nephilim series, which of course is the mix between a half angel, half human in some myths, and that's why, the right side of its body has evolved into Shagaru, and the left side is still stuck as Gore Magala, and it's not going to evolve. It's going to suffer in pain until it dies, and so it's super aggressive, wants to just attack anything, and who can blame it? Okay, next one, and one of my favorite Elder Dragons in the entire series is Gogmazios. In Japanese, his name is Gogmagiosu, so pretty much the same. Nickname is Kyogekiryu, which means the large halberd dragon, which is of course referring to the large Dragonator which is sticking outside of its body. Fun fact for Gogma is, one, I do have a monster feature for this monster on my channel, so look it up, Gaijin Hunter Gogmazios, or Gogma feature, and you'll see it. But the fun fact for this one is, in the game it never had a special icon. Like all the other Elder Dragons, it was just a question mark icon. But on March 23rd, 2015, they announced that there would be a new Gashapon series, like little capsule toys, in which they had these like knitted sort of like pin badge collections. And they had an icon shown of Gogma, which was never shown before, and this was official merchandise by Capcom. I tweeted it, and the very next day, I got an incredibly high resolution, wonderful trace redrawing by a hunter called Kevin Navia. He kindly shared it with me the next day, and I believe this is the render that, or this art, is the icon that everyone's been using now for many years. Was done by him, and this was a recreation of the icon that was shared in the photo that I uploaded, so we all have Kevin to thank for this awesome icon. But since it's been used in other places, it's appeared in Monster Hunter encyclopedias and places like that, and I always thought this icon was just the coolest thing ever. So I use it on my channel. I still use it, I think, on my Tumblr. And yeah, that's the origin of this icon. Next up was the incredibly long serpent called the Dalamadur. This is in Japanese Dara Amadura, and its nickname is Jaoryu, which is the Serpent King Dragon. And this was the online boss of Monster Hunter 4, and it was crazy big, and actually one of my first major videos that took off. I did a tutorial video because it was really hard to understand what to do during this hunt because there were so many body parts, and the arena was really unique, and I used like MS Paint to draw like the arena, and you guys watched it and you commented and you helped me get started, so thank you for that. Fun fact for this monster is that it is literally the foundation of the Rotten Vale. One or more Dalamadurs made their way to the New World and died and became skeletons, and as you go down the ramp of the Rotten Vale, you'll see the shoulder blades, and there is a skull of it down below as well. So I really hope they bring back the Dalamadur, because we've got culture of it now in both Monster Hunter 4, the 4th generation, and the New World. It'd be cool to see them find a way to bring this hunt back. The Dalamadur also got a subspecies in the G rank, or Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, called the Sha Dalamadur. In Japanese, just Dara Amadura Ashu, and its nickname is Jateryu, which is the Serpent Emperor Dragon. And the fun fact for this one is the guild be gilding again. This is not actually a scientific subspecies. We later find out through the ecology video that this, very similar to how the rusted Kushara Daora is just a variant of the regular one, this is just a Dalamadur that's finally molted. It's shed, it's become of age, and now has all this awesome fire capabilities. So the game still treats it as a subspecies, but technically it's not. But super cool hunt. Okay, moving on, we've got Valstrax, or in Japanese, Barufaruku. Its nickname is Tensuiryu, which means the Comet Dragon. And you know, Capcom's always said that Elder Dragons are like, they can defy logic, right? They don't have to make sense with their ecology or anything like that. They're meant to be cool monsters that you fight, and that's it. But I'll tell you, like, if you look into it, they've spent an obscene amount of time trying to come up with reasons of how this monster actually works. Like, how does it have the dragon energy? How does it soar through the sky so fast? And I just find it hilarious that they spend so much time when they'll come right back and say, it's an elder dragon, don't think about it too deeply. Well, obviously they do, and I think it's a cool detail. And the fun fact for this one is one of those cool details is because this thing flies so high in the sky, it would be exposed to UV or ultraviolet radiation, which would kill it. And one of the reasons it doesn't get affected by it is because it's got a mirroring type of silver sheen on its scales. So that explains why it's silver, is because it needs to be. This awesome monster also got a variant called the Crimson Glow Valstrax. The Japanese nickname for this is Kushiki Kakuyo no Barufaruku, just something like miraculously glowing Valstrax, but something very close to Crimson Glow Valstrax. For this one, they said that it came so late in development that they had sort of ran out of their ideas of the Japanese yokai, and for this one, they just wanted to go with something that was more ominous. So they went with Halley's Comet as sort of the inspiration for design, which of course, back in the day, maybe still today, was seen as something ominous or like a bad omen of something. And God be with me, help me get through the pronunciation of this monster, but probably the most mouthful I've had in all these videos is the variant that was given to it in Sunbreak, which is the Risen Crimson Glow Valstrax. In Japanese, this is just compound words. So we've got the Kai Kokufuku Kushiki Kakuyo no Barufaruku, which is the Affliction Conquered Crimson Glow Valstrax. Try saying that 5 times fast. And this theme was unlocked at Master Rank 160. I apologize for jumping back and forth throughout the generations, but it's just the nature of the Elder Dragons and trying to explain them in a way that I think is easier to digest. But we're going back to Monster Hunter Generations now, and we've got Nakarkos. Its Japanese name is Ostogaroa, and its nickname is Gairyu, which means the skeleton or skeletal dragon. Of course, similar how Kirin is like a mythical beast, it's a horse, for God's sake. This thing is a squid, but they're going to call it a dragon anyways, because Elder Dragon is just a category in this game. This was actually teased out like 2 years before Monster Hunter Generations came out. It was during the 10th anniversary. They had sort of all these like message cards from all the different directors and artists and producers and composers of the series, and Ichinose-san had a drawing of this like skeleton dragon that would use like skeletons of other monsters and stuff to attack the hunter, and he had drawn it on his 10th anniversary card, and you know, it caught a lot of our eyes like, wait, is this going to be a thing? And sure enough, it became the sort of idea that spawned into Nakarkos. Moving on to Monster Hunter World, we of course had the flagship Nergigante, or in Japanese, Nerugigante, so very similar name. Nickname is Metsujinryu, which means the Annihilation Dragon. The fun fact for this monster is similar to Gormagala in that it has a very weird way of reproducing. So it's not, what would you call it, heterosexual. It doesn't have male or female. It can pretty much spawn itself. And apparently it's got the ingredients to make itself inside of its spikes. So I don't know how that works, but apparently its spikes can be shot out and then eventually grow into little baby Nergigantes. I have no idea. I think this fits in the realm of it's an Elder Dragon, it's cool, it sounds weird, let's just run with it. He got a variant in the same game, which is Ruiner Nergigante. Has quite a mouthful of a Japanese name. It's Kotogotoku o Horobosu Nergigante, which basically means the Nergigante which annihilates all. And this was a really cool monster that unlocked, I believe, at Master Rank 100. I guess a fun fact for this one, if you consider it a fun fact, is that it joins the Seething Basilgeuse and the Narwa the Allmother in having one of the longest possible names in Japanese. Of course, that Afflicted, Risen, Crimson Glow, Valstrax would be a contender, but that's not really a monster name, that's just a compound of different conditions, where this one is a really long nickname for the variant. So 12 characters, 16 if spelled out completely. Yeah. Kotogotoku o Horobosu Nergigante. Say that 10 times fast. Actually not that bad compared to Crimson Glow Valstrax. Next up is the big boy himself, which is Zora Magdaros. In Japanese, the name is Zora Magdaros, and its nickname is Yozanryu, which is the Molten Mountain Dragon. The fun fact for this one is something that it seems like I was the last one to know. It seemed to be very common knowledge, but the Guiding Lands is basically the dead corpse of a Zora Magdaros that's now become its own sort of ecology. It's got all these different areas that can go up and down and vertical and have different seasons. So if you ever hunted in the Guiding Lands, you're hunting on top of an old Zora Magdaros. Continuing on with the 5th generation Elder Dragons, which we had a lot of, is Namiel. In Japanese, the name is Nerumieru, and the nickname is Meiryu, which is simply the Abyssal or Abyss Dragon. And this is something that I covered in my recent evolutionary tree video for the monsters of the series, but it's really rare for an Elder Dragon to be connected to another Elder Dragon. They kind of have their own lineage, but Namiel actually is related distantly to Chameleos. They sort of have a common ancestor and then deviated at some point in history to become their own species of monster, which I think is really fascinating. Hopefully the fact that they're willing to commit that much to lore means that they plan on bringing this cool monster back. Stirring in the depths of the Rotten Vale was Val Hazak. In Japanese, the name is Varu Hazaku, and the nickname of Shitoryu, which is the corpse Latin or corpse dragon. I guess one fun fact which I can share with you is that me and my daughter, as we played through the game, we had nicknames for a lot of monsters. This one in particular sort of sticks in my memory, which is, it's like a zombie because it like rises from the dead, and it seems to have like a really fleshy like substance on its body, like it's just like it ran through like the trash of a restaurant. So we would nickname it Zombifu. which is like zombie beef dragon. We both love the monster. We find it very cute. I know a lot of people looked at me awkward and said you have a weird definition of cute, but the squeal and the vacuum, the Dyson vacuum type of squeal that it does, the inhaling, everything about it I think is just adorable. And maybe it's just because we're very much into reptiles, it's got that kind of vibe to it. So yeah, Valhazak, good memories. This monster also eventually got its own variant, which is called the Black Veil Valhazak. In Japanese, it's Shiomato Baruhazaku. Shiomato, shi means death. O just means, like connects the subject to a verb. And mato means to be clad in or to be covered in. So it's covered in death. It's a very gothic, very nice name. The fun fact for this one, I guess, because I had a hard time coming up with a fun fact for it because it is kind of what it is that because of the spores that are all over its body and it's just like puffing out this mist out, it sort of creates this like veil which makes it blind. I think that's probably where they got the name Black Veil, and that's why you got that sort of like gothic bride outfit, I think, for it, is because of the veil that covers its eyes. Cool monster, and I loved the effects of it fighting it in the ancient forest. We are nearing the end, and we have the final monster of base Monster Hunter World, which is Xeno'jiiva. In Japanese, the name is Xeno'jiiva, so same name, and its nickname is Meitoryu, which is the phantom or ghostly lit dragon, taken after that sort of surreal, ghostly like blue-white veil that it has all over its body. I like the name a lot, so I'm going to make that the fun fact. Xeno, of course, is common word today, which means strange, foreign, or unknown, because it's seen as very alienish. And Jiva is from the Sanskrit word, I believe. It comes from the concept of a living entity or soul. So yeah, this is a strange entity that is filled with the life stream energy. Makes perfect sense. And of course, one of the Xeno'jiivas did manage to get away long enough to shed and bolt over and over again and become its adult form, which is Safi'jiiva. In Japanese, the name is actually kind of different. It's Mufeto Jiva, and the nickname is Sekiryu, which is simply Red Dragon. Honestly, with the connection of Alatreon and Fatalis coming afterwards, and the fact that Fatalis is just called the Black Dragon, I thought that there would be some story sort of connecting these things, and maybe they might do it one day, but the name definitely sticks out as something that feels very similar on the same playing field as the Black Dragon. Then for Monster Hunter World Iceborne, we had the new Elder Dragon Velkhana. In Japanese, the name is Iverukana, and the nickname is Hyoryu, which is the Ice Dragon. Fun fact for this one is that it has one of the best theme songs of monsters in the series. It's called the Splendiferous Silver Sovereign. You can go ahead and look that up on YouTube, but it was ranked into one of the top 10 fan favorites in the poll that they did for the 20th anniversary. We were at the concert where they were talking about it. The composer was saying how she sort of thought as Nergigante as the king, then this would be the queen. And so we kind of thought this was confirmation that Velkhana was a female monster, or at least a version of that species, but in most of the other stuff that we see, I think it refers to it as like a male monster. Probably because it's got all those decorative features, for territorial disputes and to appeal to the females of its race. So I don't know whether or not it is or not, but all signs seem to point that it's a male monster. So hey, maybe they'll grace us with a female Velkhana one day. However, when it comes to is this a lady, I don't think there's any dispute about Call of Tarath, which is Mamu Taroto in Japanese. The nickname is Rankiryu, which is the gleaming or bling dragon, as I like to call it. And she is awesome. I think the fun fact for her is that her body frame appears to be the same as the Great Jagras, which is hilarious because she's like one of the end game siege monsters, and she's basically using the same body as the very beginning runt monster of the game. This was the first time that they did a siege hunt in the game, and I thought it was a cool format. And I hope they do it again. The fun fact for her is that she's got, if you count in like the Area 1, the Area 2 and 3, 4, 5, the final, the chase versions, the variants when you are mounted on her, she's got like 12 different songs that are exclusive. Also, like the theme song that's played in the Gathering Hall when her quest is available is also unique. So Yeah, I don't know of any monster that's gotten that many weapons because they're randomized and that many theme songs to boot, so she is the queen. In rounding out Iceborne is the final Iceborne boss, which is Shara Ishvalda. In Japanese, the name is An Ishwaruda, and the nickname is Jiteiryu, which means the land tremor or the land screaming dragon. The fun fact for this one, and there's been a lot of debate in the community on whether or not it's actually this or not, but a lot of people felt that no matter where your camera was facing, that the monster looked like it was staring right at you, the player, almost breaking the fourth wall. And I think this just has to go with like, sort of like they do with like the Haunted Mansion or something at Disneyland, where there's a way of designing wall sculptures and eyes so that it looks like it's following you. But I do love that in the, for some reason, unpublished encyclopedia for Iceborne, they kind of like call this out. They mention that it might have some other sense of sensory perception going on with its eyes, but who could know for sure, because this thing is still evolving, is how they say it in the book. And I find it funny. It sort of like leaves it open for interpretation and says, hey, if you've got a fan theory about it, hey, it could be right. We can't deny it. So, nice little note from Capcom, and I'm still curious why the heck they didn't release the translated version of that encyclopedia, because I know it was planned. Jumping into Monster Hunter Rise, we've got Wind Serpent Ibushi, which in Japanese is Ibushi Makihiko, and the nickname is Fujinryu, which is the wind deity dragon. The fun fact for this, besides the fact that they never released a version of this monster that was hard, like Ibushi is just a pushover, he only gets some lovin' every 50 years or so. That's the cycle of mating between it and the female version of the same monster, which is Narwa, who comes up next. But yeah, their mating cycle is every 50 years, which is, coincides with the rampage. Ibushi causes storms just as a natural side effect of being an elder dragon, crying out for its counterpart, looking for Narwa. When they do finally meet, he has a pretty funny fate. Speaking of his mate is the Thunder Serpent Narwa, which is the female counterpart of the same monster. The name is Naruhatata Hime in Japanese, and the nickname is Daijinryu, which is the Thunder Deity Dragon. I suppose a fun fact for her is that there's not a lot of monsters in which both the male and female counterpart of the same species is included as a huntable monster in the game. So she joins monsters like Rathian, Celtis Queen, and Lunastra. So it's a small group, but I definitely love seeing just how much variation they could do with the same monster, and I hope this is a tradition that they can carry forward going into the next games. Narwa has a special variant called Narwa the All-Mother. The name in Japanese is quite interesting. It's Hyakuryu no Engen Naruhatata Hime. Hyakuryu is the name they use. It means 100 wyverns, but it's the name they use in English for the rampage. So this is the origin or the source of the rampage, which is Narwa the All-Mother. The fun fact, fun for her, maybe not for Ibushi, is that she joins the Celtis Queen and that she does cannibalism after their mating. So, shout outs, pour one out for Ibushi, F's in chat. Poor boy finally found his mate and then gets eaten. I feel so bad for that monster. Monster Hunter Sunbreak also gave us a new outer dragon in its flagship monster Malzeno, or Malzeno, I'm not sure which it was. In Japanese, it's Meruzena, and the nickname here is Shakugindu, which means the Silver Duke Dragon, because it's kind of royalty in the story of Sunbreak. And of course, where all the monsters in Rise, or a vast majority of them, were based off of Japanese yokai, the monsters in Sunbreak were based off of Western monster motifs, and this one, of course, is based on the vampire. Kind of a duh thing, but felt it was worth mentioning. And Malzeno had a variant called the Primordial Malzeno. In Japanese, it's Gensho Kizamu Meruzena, which is sort of just saying like the Malzena that marks the first, because this, as a fun fact, is actually the original sort of way the monster used to look and act. It was actually pretty docile when it came to living alongside humans. The people in the kingdom even looked at it as sort of like a guardian. And this thing sort of took an L for the team and ended up getting attacked by the Curio and being transformed into what we now know as Malzeno. But this is its original form, before it sort of got its butt kicked by the next monster. And this brings us to our very final Elder Dragon, and pretty much wrapping up this entire series, which is Gaismagorum. In Japanese, the name is Gaiaderemu, and the nickname is Meiendu, which is the Abyssal Chasm Dragon, or the Abyss Chasm Dragon. Fun fact, I guess, is that this thing was cool, but not really, I think, not really like, you know, end boss kind of stuff. I think even more deadly than this thing was probably just the Curio, which sort of has using it as a host, and it has got a symbiotic relationship. I think the Curio presented much more of a scarier risk and threat than this monster did, but it certainly was a spectacle, and there were some cool moments during the fight, but it wasn't a monster that I think I hunted all that much once I made its armor. So yeah, I was kind of hoping that we'd have a more explosive final boss for the game, but we didn't. But eventually they would give us the risen Elder Dragons, which I think served as, you know, the true endgame bosses for Sunbreak, and certainly cool. So if you got time to do more Sunbreak before the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, definitely try to get to the point where you can fight out the risen Elder Dragons. I think they are super special, and they certainly deserve their place in this list as special variants of the Elder Dragons. And that concludes the list here of all the Elder Dragons in the mainline series leading up to Monster Hunter Wilds next year. What did you guys think? Was it fun going through and, you know, down memory lane? Some of these monsters I never got to fight in their original sort of permutations, so I had to do some research and look into them, and there's still a lot I don't know. But do let me know down in the comments below if you have some really special memories of any of these Elder Dragons. I know I certainly did, and hopefully I was able to share some here today. I am going to be releasing the entire Bestiary as a one combined video, so if you're watching this as a combined video, then thank you for sticking around to the very end, which is a very long video. Or if you've been watching this as a series, thank you so much for your continued watching of all my videos, and hope you guys found this a fun exercise. I can't wait for 2025 to find out what new Elder Dragons or new monsters we're going to get to add to this Bestiary, but this concludes the full list of, I think, 229 monsters in the Monster Hunter mainline series games leading up to Monster Hunter Rise. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, thank you for your continued support, and until next time, happy hunting.